Okay, welcome everybody to the July Ordinary Council meeting for the town of Bassendean. It's great to have so many people here this evening who are interested in what's going on in the town. It's really important to us here at the town of Bassendean to always acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we meet, which are the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation. They're a very important continuing part of our community here, and we're really committed to reconciliation with the Aboriginal people of this area. There's been a slight change in the order of the agenda, so we now have at item 2 presentations, and this evening we have Michelle Pryor from the Department of Transport here to present to us on the Success Hill PSP, which is item 10.12 on the agenda. So Michelle, welcome, thank you for being here, and we'd like to invite you to come up and speak to the councillors on this project.
Thanks again for the opportunity to speak to you tonight. Is this on? Can you hear? Oh, I can sit?
Yeah, you can sit.
Okay. So, thanks again for the opportunity to speak tonight. So, my name is Michelle Pryor, Acting Director of Active Transport and Safety at the Department of Transport. I'm keen to just get up front that the council, we know the council resolved on the 27th of February 2018 to approve a principal shared path. The council resolved to do that with a few conditions. So what I'm going to do today is explain some of the background as to why we, the state government, feel that principal shared paths are a really good thing to do. And also talk to the community consultation that we've undertaken around this project, and also give a little bit of insight into what our high level ideas around our green routes concept, just so that we've got some more information for you to make your decision tonight. So you'll have to excuse me, I don't have the clicker here. We've got our clicker, our standing clicker is Phil over in the corner, so I'll be doing a few nods and a few motions over to him to click it for me, please. So, thank you. Just as part of my background, I just wanted to let you know that there's a very strong governance around what we do within the Department of Transport and Cycling for the state. Department of Transport is the lead for cycling in Western Australia, so we've got the main roads that builds some of our paths. We have the PTA, who also have some paths, but really we, as in Department of Transport, are the ones that set the priority, that dictate what type of guidelines that we produce, and work with local governments, whether that's through our grants program or with innovations that we have around safe active streets, which I know there is one also for occurring within the town as well. But essentially we're it when it comes to state government and cycling. To give further weight to this is we have a very strong governance structure, as I mentioned, and at the strategic level we have a variety of interested stakeholders across the state that are involved in cycling, involved in what we do. So when I say that, and I refer to the presentation, the central box, we've got Department of Transport, we've got Department of Local Government, Cultural and Sporting Industries, we've got Department of Planning, Lands and Heritage, we have West Cycle, which is consists of around over 30 member-based organised groups, member-based cycling groups. We have the police, we have the WA Road Safety Commission, we have IPWIA, we have WOLGA, we have Tourism WA, Department of Health. So anyone and everyone who's got an interest in the co-benefit of cycling is involved in what we do and has some measure and support for what we do through the WA Bicycle Network Plan 2014 to 2031. Now there's a variety of groups around that through WOLGA's got a reference group, West Cycle have got a reference group, we've got working groups, we've got an operational reference group. The point being, there's strong support for what we do around cycling and strong support, full stop. So, next slide please. So, I mentioned the WA 9th Bicycle Network Plan. This is the plan to make Western Australia a place where cycling is safe, connected, convenient and a widely accepted form of transport. Within that, we clearly have a very strong vision to expand the PSP network, and also what we do, what we call as filling the missing gaps on our PSP network. We have our WA Bicycle Network Grants program, which is for local governments, both regional and metro. We have a Safe Active Streets program, Connecting Schools program, and also Connecting Stations. So again, I know this is very background, but I think it's important to set the tone, and that's to look at, well, why do we have this cycling infrastructure? Why do we have infrastructure anyway? We know this is data that comes from Portland, but we've seen it repeated in multiple parts of the world. We know that when we do a poll on who's the community, we know there's about 1% of people that identify as being strong and fearless cyclists. They're the ones that are out there right now on road, mixing with trucks, and you'll barely see them on a path. Then we know that there's about 6% of the population, which we call enthusiastic and confident. They're also out there, but they're mostly using bike paths. Then there's about 60% of the population are the ones that I really care about. They're the ones that say, I would ride, but I don't feel safe on a road. I want a path to ride on. So if we can move and encourage those people to be cycling more, we're going to get all those wonderful benefits that we see for cycling, whether that's reduced pollution, reduced congestion, better environmental outcomes, social outcomes, etc. But what we do know is their biggest concern is safety, and they do not want to be with cars on the road. Okay, thanks. So in terms of the WA Bicycle Network Plan and our vision for a PSP network, PSP is the Principal Shared Path Network for both cyclists and pedestrians, clearly for pedestrians as well. The state government has a strong focus on cycling with this last budget from the state government giving $146 million towards cycling infrastructure across Western Australia. So a large proportion of that is to go towards PSPs, Principal Shared Paths. There's 3 priority projects we see, one of which is being the Success Hill Station to Railway Parade Missing Link. So all of this PSP program, our retrofitting or Missing Link program, is clearly about filling those gaps so that we can create a strong, connected, legible pathway so that people can actually ride a continuous link, a continuous route. So that's what we're trying to achieve. So we've got a vision for our PSP network. It's a staged approach. There's various parts that are missing, but we know that we have got plans for what certain aspects will be built and when, depending on when we get the funds. So just wanting to make that quite clear. So the next slide, please. The Success Hill to Railway Parade PSP. This project is a completion of a 230 metre missing link in an otherwise continuous 14 kilometre part of the PSP. Once we've completed this missing link, we'll be able to people will be able to ride from the CBD to Midland or anywhere along that route with ease. There's been multiple efforts to design this project since it commenced in 2016, and we've had lots of community consultation in the last couple of years, and lots of changes and a lot of listening has been going on as well. So in 2016, there was initial feedback indicating a preference for a verge alignment. So this is when Main Roads was communicating with Town of Bassendean staff around what was the preferred alignment, and what was the preferred option. And it was quite clear that a verge alignment was that clear preference. So then fast forward to January 2018, we developed concepts, admittedly, and then in 2018, Council gave an endorsement on in 2018 we presented that to the public, to the community with the Town of Bassendean, and then there was further community consultation. Then Council endorsed on that date, 27th of February 2018, endorsed the concept plan for this principal shared path on conditions about that tree loss was addressed. We received quite a few complaints about the impact on the verge, and we agreed with the Town of Bassendean in 2018-19 to explore options to use road space in addition to verge space. And then in May 2019, we did consultation on 3 options based on what that was, on 3 alignment options, which is really what we'll touch on tonight. Next slide, thanks. But just jumping back a moment, with the consultation that we undertook in January, February 2018, there was major feedback themes that came through. And look, this is what informed your decision in the February official council meeting. So there was support for the project. There was support for the project with as much vegetation as possible kept. There was support for the PSP to fill the missing gap on the network. Now, there was some concerns about the trees and vegetation. There was arguments saying it should be left as it is. There was queries as to why and why not an on-road section or a safe active street to be built. There was also concerns about the speeds of cyclists on the shared path, and they could potentially conflict at the station, the successive station entries at Victor Point. Now, I've put this up here just to, again, some of those same some of that feedback we're still hearing today, but I just wanted to reiterate, and I will go through some of our reasoning on how we've responded to that, but I just think it's really important to note that regardless, Council still put forward that we'll be going forward with a PSP. Okay, so consultation feedback. Following, so I'll go through some of the feedback in a moment as to what the responses were, as in the general themes and how we've responded. But I just did also want to note that following the Council approving this PSP, we undertook detailed design of the concept. Community had requested that upon the completion of that detailed design that we undertake a site visit, which we did in November 2018. So it was at that site visit with Town of Bassendean council officers, and I believe councillors were also present, some further discussion around the concept was had, and it was decided that we would take some of that feedback and consider what other options could there be around not only just a verge but road alignment, as well as how can we save more trees. So just wanting to flag, that's what, as a result of a site visit that occurred in November 2018. Oh, actually, sorry, next one, Phil. Thanks. So just going back to some of that consultation and the feedback that we had. So leave it as it is. We have an on-road section. Some of the feedback at the time was that some respondents would have rather have left it as it is than have trees removed. As we stated, this is the only missing gap on the Perth to Midland PSP. This will be the most complete PSP, bringing all those people through your town and increasing safety for those local residents as well. Now, we know that this is not necessarily an on-road option. It may be suitable for experienced cyclists, but it's not suitable when you consider families. It's not suitable when you consider children. It's not suitable when you consider less experienced cyclists. For all those reasons I talked about before, that 60% of the population that say, I don't want to mix it with the cars, give me a path please. So that's why we build path. Why not an on-road section? This is the kind of feedback we've received. We say that it lacks continuity. We know that changing a facility over a short distance is not desirable. It's not what makes a legible path. The evidence coming from Europe at the moment is that we see about a 20 to 25% increase in people using the network when it is completely connected. So that's what we're aiming for. Again, anything on road is not suitable for pedestrians or people with mobility devices or children. So, keep going, thank you. We have also had some feedback around the speed of cyclists and conflicts with pedestrians. And we will take this into consideration. Clearly, what we have in our, that's what detailed design's about. And we've been doing this for quite some time. There's great treatments that you can see outside Bassendean train station. There's other treatments on the network where we know that through design and through other interventions, we can be slowing cyclists down and increasing awareness of pedestrians as well. So just to note though, pedestrians exiting successive stations around 136 daily boardings at the moment anyway. So we're not talking large numbers of people exiting that train station from the outset. The other thing to note, and this is more of a recent update, the road safety audit that was undertaken recently doesn't indicate any concerns that could not be mitigated throughout the detailed design process. So I just think that's really important. And just to note, that was some strong response from the community around that and the need for a road safety audit, which we've undertaken, and I believe that's part of your council papers tonight. So there's also been some queries, thank you, Phil, around the cost to develop and construct PSP. Like I mentioned before, and perhaps statements along the lines of this is a waste of money and it should be spent elsewhere. We clearly believe that, and we know that creating a safe, continuous PSP, it's a government priority. This government is coming with a very clear agenda around cycling. and creating a connected PSPs within 15 kilometres of the CBD is part of that. Just to note as well, in terms of cost, the RAC, through their cycling business case for cycling, state that a return on investment, and be that economic, social, health and environmental benefits for cycling infrastructure, is between 3.4 and 5.4 times the cost incurred. So I just thought to note that we do know that we get the benefits when we invest in cycling infrastructure. Others would also, just to reiterate, that we have a planned and prioritised PSP network. This is part of that. So to say that we could be spending this money elsewhere, well, really, as the lead for cycling and developing that priority for the state, we've got a fairly good idea of what we think comes before others and as to why, and this is quite clearly important. So, thank you. Again, just to highlight for you all, it was discussed and it was resolved at the council meeting to have a look at that a green routes pilot project. Now this, from our perspective and my perspective, this is about activation. So of course we get those fantastic green corridor outcomes as well, but we want people using the cycling network, and if we can get as many people as engaged and involved and attracted to use it, then we're getting great outcomes. So we're still committed to this, and I'll talk to it at the end of this presentation, just some of those high-level ideas that we've got around that. So, thank you. So as I mentioned before, we did, next slide, thanks Bill. So as I mentioned before, we did do detailed design, and then there was site visit feedback in 2018, where there was some concerns over tree loss. There was support for a road or verge option, which we were not aware of before. So the action coming out of that was that we met with the town of Bassendean to further discuss and consult on different alignment options that could further mitigate tree loss. So with trees being a continued issue, and this recognition that perhaps road or verge options were a feasible option for us. Thanks, Bill. So then, options. I'm just going to go through the 3 PSP options that were put to the community, which is really up for the council to consider tonight. Option 1 is essentially this first option that was agreed, was the resolution back in February 2018. So you'll note that there's a lot of balustrading. That's because this is raised to protect the tree roots and to protect as many trees as possible in this 220 metre section. It does, through saving those trees, there is some twists, not twists, but there is some navigation of the trees. But we've kept as many within the verge and saved as many trees as we possibly could. And again, it is raised to ensure that the roots are aired, and we've had consultation with arborists on this, and it's quite clearly the best outcome for the trees if we were to run this in the verge. Okay. The next option is mixing both the verge and road space alignment, which narrows the road just outside the railway station. There is some tree loss, but not as significant as the first. It is an option. And then the third option, thank you Phil, is really mixing the verge and road alignment. So this has got the best outcomes for trees. It does reduce the road space. It does reduce parking, but that's all being communicated to the community, and I'll go through that feedback in a moment. But this is by far the best outcome for trees. It still creates a safe, connected, legible piece of infrastructure for people that walk and cycle. And I believe it is it is certainly the Department of Transport's recommended option. And yes, you'll no doubt discuss that later on tonight. So then we did community consultation. Thanks, Phil. We did community consultation in May of this year on these 3 options. And it was communicated very broadly through the engagement platform that the town of Bassendean has, also through West Cycle and other avenues. We received a total of 76 responses. Now, of the 50 responses that selected one or more alignment options, 64% supported option 3. There were some that chose no options, and that was 26 of those that responded to the survey. So I just thought we would note that. But again, we went to the community with 3 clear options on PSP. So then, next slide, thanks Phil. So in terms of the recommendations, the Department of Transport and Main Roads recommend option 3 is progressed through to detailed design expediently. We would look to have the detailed design completed by the end of 2019, and we could construct, with construction completed by March 2020. Should it be option 3, because it is quite a straightforward piece of construction. And then with revegetation occurring across the winter in 2020. Now, I just want to make it clear, we've got revegetation, which I know we've agreed to as being 3 to 1 for any tree loss for that section. But in addition to that, we would still look at having a green route activation and green route planning, which would commence in September 2019. So it's a little bit different, because we actually see the Green Routes pilot project as quite a substantial project that looks to re-vegetate and green a larger part of the PSP network within the town of Bassendean, and that we've got extensive evaluation, because we would like to see how that goes with the view of rolling it out in other parts of the PSP across Metro Perth. So option 3 provides inclusive access for both cyclists and walkers, tree retention and other cost savings on the other options. There'll also be lighting and other great amenity and obviously vegetation options as a result. We know this is supported by the community. It supports future precinct planning, and it does also, whilst it does restrict some on-street parking, the impact will be minimal given low traffic volumes and existing parking restrictions. As I mentioned before, 3 to 1 planting options in option 3 will result in 9 trees, so that's 9. I think we talked about with the first option there being well in excess of 9. But DOT will fund additional greening along the Midland Railway PSP within the town of Bassendean to be co-delivered with the town and the community as part of that route activation. So I've just got a couple more slides. So thanks for your patience. This is really, look, this is very high level. The reason why we haven't done extensive discussion or consultation with the town of Bassendean on the Green Routes project at this stage is because we needed to see what outcome the council wanted to go with the options on PSP. So this is really up for discussion, but I just really wanted to float it that there will be consultation with town of Bassendean officers. But I just wanted to give you the flavour of what we're really going to be potentially going to be seeing. So this is a collaborative community and local government, state government pilot to design and implement a green landscape along Midland Railway PSP. The project would include an audit of the paths to assess existing vegetation and identify potential greening locations. This would be done by a working group including community representatives. We would look to have stakeholder workshops with the town of Bassendean, PTA and Main Roads to assess the viability of this plan, or of a plan. We would look to do a project concept plan, and then which is published for community feedback, including looking at the place qualities in the plan, because this is about placemaking and activation as well on this path. And then a detailed design to be developed and landscape works included, which would include a plan for community involvement in the implementation. That's really important from our perspective and for all, I think, that this is seen as an opportunity for the community to take ownership of these plants that we're trying to regreen and to really try to, there's great opportunities to involve school children or just other members of the community involved in this. And just in case in point, we're doing it, there's a PSP that's being built down on Fremantle Line right now, and I believe that there's a local school group that's going to be doing some tree planting along that in the coming weeks, because that's just about to be completed. So that's an example of what they've done, but what I'm proposing is a lot different in that this is a stronger consultation process, this is a stronger plan, there will be pre and post evaluation, and this will be the first of its type that we've certainly done in partnership with the local government. And then lastly, of course, we want people to be now using our path because of this great greening. So we will activate this local infrastructure to complement the pilot. So there's just a couple of examples on the other page, thanks Phil, of how it could look. And again, this is all very could, maybe. I've got a few disclaimers around this, because clearly this would be determined by community feedback and feasibility studies, and in consultation with the town of Bassendean. So there could be things like green walls or vertical gardens. We would explore these things in the design phase. We would consider the proximity of these structures to the path and rail fences, as well as their future maintenance, which would need to be considered. So there's a lot of ifs, but you can get a sense of what we're planning to do. Existing local gardening sustainability and action groups would be engaged throughout. Paths, walks, path rides and planning workshops would also be undertaken. And when I'm saying this is fairly new. Well, it's new for Perth, but it's not entirely new in other parts of the world. So there's a couple of examples of where it's occurred. New York High Line, although that's a bit of an aspirational example. But the city of Darebin has also done it. It's a local government, I believe, on the east coast as well. So, and the way that they've undertaken it is similar to what we've suggested, but with a lot of landscaping of, again, local Indigenous plantings that are suitable for the area. So that's really, I guess, what my presentation is tonight. Is there any questions from council?
Hello, thank you for that, and I appreciate the undoubtedly the expense that's gone into where we're at currently. Just one of the items I just noticed, the item before this one in Whitfield Street. I think they used to be called bicycle boulevards, but now they've got a new buzz meaning around them called safe active streets. So I'm just wondering in relation to that. I mean, I don't know if you know much about the bicycle boulevard safe active street, but that potentially could be workable in that section, could it not?
No. So firstly, yep. I do know about safe active streets.
Yes. Yep.
So my team looks after them as well.
Yes.
And yes, Bicycle Boulevard, the name did change. It was the original concept and it's used in other parts of the world. But when we went out to community consultation with that, there was people had concepts of pelotons of bikes going down their local roads, and it not being, this was a demonstration project, so that wasn't acceptable for us. So of course it became a safe active street, because that is actually what that is. It's where you treat the road environment, so you reduce it to a 30km/h area. The section that we're talking about, 220 metres, is not what we would consider suitable for a safe active street, as Department of Transport safe active street, where we fund safe active streets. This is clearly an area in the rail reserve for it's clearly to link our principal shared path. So if you were to suddenly go from what we consider a primary road principal shared path to a safe active street, again, you change that legibility and it becomes an unfamiliar environment, and it's not something we would ever do on our PSP network. So number one. Number two, when we do our safe active street projects in partnership with local government, they're on local roads, so that's a tick, but they're longer routes, and they also connect us destinations. So for example, when you have a look at Whitfield Street, you're going from up one end where you've got your shopping centre right down to Sand Bay, and there's other places along that route. So it's a longer route. It's a recognised cycle-only route, and clearly a principal shared path is for pedestrians as well, so we would not be recommending that.
Just one other from me, just in relation to the lighting. So I know you talk a lot about cyclists with the principal shared path. I'm actually a walker, so I utilise the path quite frequently to walk to Midland. Just with the lighting, certainly in Guildford, when you get to that area, sort of where the old post office was, then going along where East Guildford is at the train station stuff, the lighting is very dim. Now this is a street, and on the northern side of the street you've got power poles with lights on. Has there been discussions with Western Power in upgrading that lighting to try and uplight the area, as well as sort of putting in your lighting?
Okay. So I'm not aware of any conversations with Western Power per se, but what I will say is that once with the construction of the PSP, there will be additional lighting. There is RAC last year did a review of certain parts of the PSP network to look at lighting. Main Roads is looking at upgrading some of its lighting on different parts of the network. There's certainly a move to improve, if there's any parts of the network where there's not so good lighting, that there's a move to improve that as part of the maintenance approach. So this section that we're talking about will definitely have improved lighting. So making, better visibility, better security, and better for all users.
So Councillor Wilson was next.
Thank you, Worship. Thank you for your presentation. It's very comprehensive. I've just got questions related to two of the slides. The first one I'll address is the high-level discussion around a green
route.
Green route, that's what we're calling it. And I notice there's a lot of caveats on that.
Yes.
Do you have an idea about a time frame that all of those steps would take?
What I can say is that we'll commence planning as soon as we get an outcome. We will commence planning for this in September. But again, there are caveats because we haven't had really extensive conversations with the town on it at this stage, and this is your community, and it's really important that we work in partnership to ensure that we get the best outcomes when it comes to this green route project.
And I appreciate all of that. Is there any existing budget, or would you need to seek budget?
No, we would need to clarify. We would need to see what the outcome of Council's decision tonight, which will then indicate how we would manage, how we would fund this. But there is will, and we do have budget. I'm just not at liberty to disclose what it is because we don't actually know what it is that we're talking about. So
hypothetically, if option 1 was selected, it's significantly more expensive than option 3. You would use some of the savings from the...
Not necessarily. No, not necessarily. I see this, and this has been discussed at Department of Transport, as quite separate. PSP is PSP construction. This is an activation project where we are looking to increase the numbers of people using our PSP network and cycling through green route activation. So
yes.
You see it's slightly different.
I do, and I appreciate it's a novel approach that you're looking to adapt to meet changing circumstances, and that creates uncertainty. In what way would Council's decision tonight affect the funding available for...
No, sorry, I probably should have rephrased that. It's not... I need to understand there is a resolution that has been previously agreed to around the concept design.
Replacing lost trees 3-to-1, that part?
And a green route in addition to the tree replacement.
So a green routes program will occur regardless of what decision is being made, but it's what option, sorry, let me clarify, it's just what option you go to.
Okay.
The green routes project will occur regardless.
Thank you. The other questions that I have relate to this slide with the survey results. And I appreciate that it's difficult to derive any meaning out of a survey response of 76 people given the number of people who would use the path. I appreciate it's not a representative sample. However, 39% of people here are indicated as having selected no option. I can guess maybe it's because people either had no preference or they didn't want either of the 3 options to go ahead at all, or maybe there was a 4th option or a 5th option that they preferred. Did you get any insight into the reason why there was no option selected?
I didn't get an insight as to why there was no other option selected, but if you're making reference to a 4th option, I have seen some communication regarding a proposed 4th option from the community. Yes. But I would like to note that it is not a PSP, and the council has resolved on a PSP, and the Department of Transport is clearly looking at a PSP. And we have responded, this survey, which looked at 3 options of PSP, was born from the agreement and understanding, the resolution I should say, that there is a PSP. So that's why we didn't entertain any option.
Which is grade separation between the road and the cycleway.
That's correct.
So I've been advised that a 4th option, for want of a better term, was presented to departmental staff at some stage to be looked at or worked up at all. Was any formal analysis done of that as a possible
we
option?
looked at that, which it was an on-road option, and as I've explained, an on-road option is not an option that the Department of Transport would look to work up.
And just one final question, sorry, Your Worship. This is a state government project and a state government election commitment, as you've mentioned. Has the local member provided any feedback as to his preferred alignment in this process, or was he surveyed as a part of this community consultation?
And it's not as far as I'm aware, but I believe he has been looped in to this consultation quite extensively. Through other members of the public, I believe he's aware of it. But my decision maker is the Minister for Transport, and I know that her office is completely across this and supportive of what we're doing as well.
Yes. Thank you.
Councillor Brown.
G'day, thank you for that. The original community concerns centred on tree loss, vegetation loss. Through torturous route we overcame most of those concerns, and the rhetorical concerns have now changed to one of safety. I recognise PSPs inherently have some dangers, but there is some legitimate concerns because it is a junction, I understand, between the railway station and the PSP and the road. Can you briefly detail how you are going to engineer in safety to that particular area?
So I'll give you, to the best of my ability, I'll respond to that question. So, as I mentioned before, there's around 136 people leaving that station. So there is some risk, but there is some risk. However, there's also, when we undertook this road safety audit, there's also risk riding on the road. And we've had an incident in the last few years of a cyclist being hit by a car because of coming out and riding on that railway parade. So there's more risk riding on the road than as in the evidence that we can see at the moment. In terms of what we would do, well, firstly, this is not the first time we've seen these kinds of things at train stations where we've got a PSP next to a train station. So Bayswater Station is probably a good example where we use what's called rumble strips, and we use paint on the path, and we use, some interventions to slow down cyclists and also increase the awareness of other pedestrian users. One of the treatments that we use is green paint. So you might see that in some areas on the path if you're on the PSP network as well, or other parts of the network. So we use ways to disrupt people when they're undertaking their behaviour, be it cycling or walking, so that then they will become more aware of their surrounding and slow their speed, or just become more aware of other path users.
Thank you. The use of bells as a warning device, as in horns on cars, would that be part of community education, or would it be signposted that as people go through, they use bells?
That's certainly something we could look at. And there's, on other parts of the network, there's signage that they've placed that says things along the lines of share this space and be mindful of other users. In fact, I believe through the Your Move program, which I have some awareness of as well, I believe there's some path signs that are going to be put on the PSP network right now, and that is, a lot of that is about bike safety as well.
Look, I accept that probably the danger aspect can be engineered out and it may be overblown. I've just returned from Brisbane where they have shared cycle paths all around that particular city. You don't have just motor push bikes, you have electric scooters and cycles whizzing in and out of traffic. It seems to be fairly compatible, but they do use their bells. And it's not considered a rude gesture, it's considered a courtesy, so that's something maybe we could work on. So thank you very much.
No problem.
Councillor Quinton?
Yes,
And then Councillor.
just following on from those questions, how many other intersections along the transport train route connect with not just a PSP but a footpath? I know there's one at City West, and you mentioned one in Bayswater. Are there any others along the route, and what do they look like?
Well, there's various whether it's crossovers for cars driving in, like, so for example down at
Maylands.
There's also down at East Perth, near East Perth train station. There's multiple. I mean, I could take it on notice to get you the actual number, but I can certainly do that if that's what you'd like.
My question is more around the incidents of accidents at those intersections. Did the reports come to you about those incidents?
So look, there is a bit of a gap in data around, and this has been addressed by, well, this has been noted by the Auditor General in 2015, around the collection of data on some of the path networks. There isn't a mechanism out there, frankly, which is something that we're developing. Main Roads has got a mechanism to collect data for incidents on any roads. We just don't have it for the path network per se. So we do have a hazard reporting tool, which you can go to the Department of Transport's website, and if you've got an issue or a hazard, you can be reporting that. But when you've specifically mentioned an incident, we don't have that yet, but it's something that we'll be developing.
On that then, it used to be, there was a community app called the Black Spot app, where you could report gaps in the cycling infrastructure. And this was, 2013, 2014, and if you're a cyclist, you could take a photo, upload it to the app, and it was sent directly to the Minister in your department. So is this kind of thing something that cyclists would say would be a gap or a black spot in cycling? Because generally when they get forced off a path onto the road, that was one of the things that they talked about.
Yes, certainly. When they go from a path to a road, it does increase the risk. And like I said, we've seen an incident, a Main Roads reported incident following, in recent years, which was reported in the road safety audit, which suggests just that. So we know, and one of the key outcomes of that report is to create a safe, separated piece of infrastructure for cyclists and pedestrians to use. So yes, so that the key recommendation out of the report is to create a path, and yes, it would improve the safety.
One more question. We're talking a lot about cyclists, but we haven't mentioned a lot about pedestrians, people with prams, people in wheelchairs, people on gophers.
Yes.
A lot of principal shared pathway is what we're talking about here. Can you talk to me about how that has happened on other sections of the network, about people using it more? Because this isn't just about cyclists.
No, it's absolutely not just about cyclists. It's about pedestrians and people that are all members of the community. We know that we have an ageing population, and we know that one of the biggest ways to keep people healthy and healthy in their home is to keep them active and to encourage people to walk more. The Department of Transport is soon to develop a state walking strategy. So again, walking is an increasingly a big priority for us for all the benefits that we know. So when it comes to the path network, we do see a lot of walkers. We see people walking between train stations. We see walkers using it because it is lit and safe. It's cool, especially when you've got great vegetation around it. It's used to go between stations. There was a physical activity campaign a few years ago which encouraged people to stop a station earlier or to park further away so that you can walk to the station. So that's clearly what we would be supporting, and this infrastructure would support as well.
Thank you. Councillor Hamilton.
Okay. So looking at all the notes and what have you, I believe that the option 3 reduces the road width down to 4.6 metres, and I think in the documents I read where the original road width was 7.3 metres, I think. So that would seem to indicate that option 3 comes out onto the road a lot more than the first option that we approved way back when. So am I correct in assuming that a significant portion of this option 3 takes up more road space than it does verge?
That's a good question. I'm not sure if it takes up more road space than verge. I would suggest it would. what I can say is, to your point, the road is narrowed to 4.6 metres for the length of the project.
Yeah.
But it's still, you can easily pass 2 cars. It's still a safe
No, I
environment.
know that.
Yeah.
I just know, I just can't find the page.
No, that's
but
fine.
Somewhere else, I think it started off as 7.6 or 7.3, sorry. Now, my next question is relating to where the walkway is at the train station. Looking at this plan, it does look like you have brought, that's the narrowest section where you've brought the path out more onto the road. So that would probably be your 4.6 metres, that narrowest section. So that makes me believe that probably further down Railway Parade, the road becomes a little bit wider. So that section where it comes out further onto the road, where the people come off the train station bridge, do you have any idea how much further out that has brought the path from that bridge? Because obviously that's a section where everyone is talking about the potential for collision there. So I'm curious, because on this plan it really does look like that's come out onto the road a lot more, and I'm curious about how close that path is now once this plan is done to people coming off the bridge. And the other question I have relates to barriers, because on this drawing it looks like there's a barrier there where people come off that walkway from the railway station as well. So in the pictures, the first picture, viewpoint 1.
Finding it a little bit difficult to read that
Yeah,
part.
the barrier sections, as far as I can see, are further down the bike path.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds right.
But in the visual there, it looks like there's a little
Oh
barrier.
yes, there's a little one there on that side. It's because of the drop off, and that's again a safety feature.
Okay, so with the barriers, there looks like there's 2 sections of barriers down the bike path. One is about halfway down, and the other one is closer to the cul-de-sac end. The cul-de-sac end barrier looks like it's longer, and the one halfway down looks like it's quite short. Has PTA looked at alternatives to these metal barriers? I know that that's the section where the path comes up a little bit.
Okay, so firstly, this is a concept. So we're only at, this is like we haven't yet taken this to detailed design where we could explore different other options. I guess what we wanted to highlight is that we would suggest a barrier there because at this stage it's suggesting that there would be a drop off.
Yep.
So as to different other types of treatments or different other types of infrastructure, we could explore that in the detailed design phase.
Okay. I think that's. I did note you said one of the things in your presentation said you start the green route planning in September, but I think that's just the planning, not the planting.
No,
Okay.
sorry, the planning, yes, not the planting.
Not planting. Sorry, I just need to qualify that in my head. I think that's all from me.
Councillor Mikachuk, anything from you? No? Councillor Wilson?
Sorry, just one follow-up question. So I spent a year riding the Bassendean to City section and back of the principal shared path, and I appreciate that at every single train station and at other points in between there are connection points with pedestrians and the principal shared path. This isn't a novel problem, but I do note that the problem's been addressed in very different ways at different points along the path. I think the Mount Lawley station, for example, has a single blind turn, but then if you go to Bayswater, there's a variation that makes people physically look both ways before they can cross. If you've said this is just an indicative drawing... And
Sorry, that's numbers 2 and 3. The first one has gone to detailed design, the first option.
Right.
So
if hypothetically option 2 or 3 gets supported and you do go to detailed design, will there be a further opportunity for people in the community who have concerns about pedestrian safety or people coming off the train station to be involved in that discussion, or would that happen just internally with the department staff?
I would suggest we've got a road safety audit and we've done extensive consultation. We would probably discuss that with the town of Bassendean. and we would be open to that, but I'd say that we know that the majority of the community support this. We know that the council resolved for a PSP, and we know that we know how to build them. I would suggest that we would probably just get on and build it. Once we've done the detailed design and discussed with the town of Bassendean.
Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. Quite a lot of interrogation there. Really appreciate your time this evening and your answers. And when we get to that item, there'll be more discussion, I'm sure. Thank you very much. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, councillors. So item 3 is attendances, apologies, and applications for leave. Are there any? Councillor Mitchell?
For leave from the 26th of July to the 6th of August.
So 26th of July to the 6th of August. Councillor Hamilton?
1st of August to the 8th.
Any further? Okay, we have a mover for those. Councillor Quinton moves, seconded Councillor Gangel. All those in favour? It's carried unanimously. Okay, so moving on to item 4, which is public question time. 4.1, we've got some questions that were taken on notice at the last meeting that have had the responses recorded in the agenda. 4.2 is the opportunity now for members of the public who would like to ask questions to do so. Now there's quite a few people here tonight, so obviously there's a lot of interest in particular items on tonight's agenda. So just so that everybody gets a fair hearing, I'll remind everyone that there's 2 questions per person, at least initially, and 2 minutes to do so. If there's time at the end, then obviously you'll be given an opportunity to ask further questions, but just to make sure that we get through everybody in a fair and timely manner, that would be great. If you'd like to ask a question, you can raise your hand and I'll invite you to come to the microphone and do so. Mr. Robinson, is it? Please come to the microphone, and would you mind just stating your full name and your address for the minute taker, please?
My name's Bruce Robinson. I'm president of the Cyclist Action Group. I come past Bassendean relatively frequently, particularly more recently when there's been discussion about the PSP, but I live in Cottesloe. But it's, you can come nearly all the way. As Michelle said in a very polished and persuasive presentation, there's a range of information. She's not quite correct in saying this is the only gap. I rode tonight through Yagan Square and things where there's an illegible jumble of paths and roads and whatever, so she was not correct there. And the PSP doesn't go to Midland, it only goes to Morrison Road, and you end up in a big car park. So that bit was mildly. So, the Department of Transport, as she said, conducted a resident survey and a road safety audit recently, but both of these completely omitted, as she said, consideration of the on-road option or the safe active street things. Those options would be dramatically cheaper, of course, which is not a worry for the town of Bassendean. It's the state money. It could be spent much better elsewhere. The on-road options are probably very much safer, and of course the on-road options would be far less destructive. Do you think, council think these existing options, the option 4, as someone mentioned, should be considered more? Because clearly the Department of Transport is fixated on the PSP thing when the existing thing works very well, and there's lots and lots of examples on the PSP, other places where cyclists go onto busy roads. This is barely a road, it's just a slightly wider path. But
so I'm not sure that we can answer that right now, because council
will have... It's a rhetorical question.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Ms. Jacobson.
Bonnie Jacobson, Spartan Parade, Bassendean. My question is, has there actually been a study done of the road users of that section of the road, footpath, and that 220 metres we're talking about?
Through the chair, the only consultation I'm aware of is what's been presented tonight.
So I think the question was around whether there'd been a study done of road users.
The existing road use. Yeah.
I don't believe that has been done. No.
And also of the pedestrian use, because there is an existing pedestrian footpath there. There isn't really a need for pedestrians to be relocated onto another path. So I'm just wondering if that's actually been looked at before, assuming that we need to fill this missing link, whether it's really missing.
Through the chair, look, we don't have the stats, but the data is low. There's a low number of vehicles. I think I have seen the number within these reports, and there was a low number of, quite a low number of users of the train station as well that Michelle presented, which I think was about 270, I think, all day.
Yeah. Is it possible that cyclists are actually the main user of that road?
I think it's probably speculation because we don't have that data, but as someone who lives in that area, I can also, there's obviously an existing footpath along the opposite side of the road, but I've noticed that a lot of pedestrians don't use the footpath because it's quite difficult to navigate, and so a lot of pedestrians will actually walk on the road in preference to the existing footpath.
So there is a current sentiment that the road is quite safe for pedestrians and cyclists.
I didn't say that, you're putting words in my mouth. What I said was
I
the existing footpath is not ideal. Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you. Mrs. Tate, and then you, Mr. Yates.
Tate from Railway Parade, Bassendean. Again, talking about PSP. I noted option 4 was discarded on the basis that it didn't cater for all abilities due to getting on and off the road over a short distance. Why is this a problem when the street has very few vehicle movements, as was noted? And is it worse than creating the hazard of cyclists hitting pedestrians when they leave the station, or the hazard of collisions in the balustraded narrow area? Now, you can imagine if you've got a pram and a peloton comes past you and you've got a barrier up there, you can't move aside, that could be rather dangerous. So why aren't standard safety practices being looked at, and why are we not minimising the high risk?
Thank you. Mr. Yates.
Thank you. Don Yates, 10 Thompson Road, Success Hill. Just on the PSP, has the Department of Transport inserted grade separation at the north side of Success Hill station, where the PSP actually is underneath the pedestrians? Because I believe that would improve the safety dramatically. And also a simple step, which we found in Thompson Road, where Western Power by itself actually fixed some of the lighting issues when the light failed and the light globe was replaced. So maybe what we need in Railway Parade is just even to get Western Power to change the notional 125 watt fluoros, for example, to 100 watt LEDs. It's a light globe change. The effect
Mr. Yates, on that point, I'll ask our CEO to respond to that.
Thanks, Mr. Yates. I just wanted to confirm that one of the agenda items we were going to discuss tonight was around an underground power proposal from Western Power. It won't be discussed tonight, but one of the discussions we've been having with Western Power is the potential to incorporate Success Hill within the parameters of that project. So we've got a couple of projects going on at the moment that sort of oscillate on one another, and so we're still to get some further detail from Western Power on exactly what will be within the scope of that project.
Thank you. Just a quick little follow-up. There was the suggestion we should get someone to wander up and down Thompson Road with an air rifle and just keep taking out the lights, because that seems to be one of the quickest ways to increase the power of the lighting in the street. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Mr. Bridges. Oh, sorry. You're next.
Paul Bridges, West Road, Bassendean. This is a question I've asked on a number of occasions, and each time I've been assured that yes, it will happen. I refer to a motion that was carried in May of last year by Council on the Municipal Heritage Inventory, at which it was carried basically that the 48 properties in Category 1 and 2 would be included within the heritage list within the town planning scheme. Now, Mr. Reid has guaranteed me on both occasions that it was imminent and that he would be doing the work, and I'm wondering whether the work has been done or whether I'll be told again that it's imminent.
We don't have Mr. Reid here tonight, but Mr. Buttle will kindly answer your question.
Thank you, through the Chair. I'll have to take that question on notice, liaise with Mr. Reid, and I'll advise you accordingly.
Thank you. Could I just add, from the same motion, it was also determined that an amount would be set aside for heritage incentives. Now, I know that allocation of 10,000 has been used for another purpose, but Mr. Reid at the time said that was the heritage incentive element could be done with in-house. I totally agree that it could be. It's not very complicated. So could Mr. Buttle add that to his answer for me? Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome.
Good evening. Robert Hodge, Anzac Terrace. It's to do with the PSB. And we'd just like, will the council consider organising a working meeting with residents and the councillors, Department of Transport, to review all options, including the fourth option, with the objective of a win for all stakeholders?
Well, it's something for council to consider when it comes to this item. So I'm sure everybody has heard you, but councillors will consider that when it comes to this item. Thank you. Emma, you first.
I'm Emma Darby and I live at Anzac Terrace. My question was about the... Sorry. Hold on a moment. What the heck?
Turn the phone off.
I'm trying.
Where's your daughter?
There we go.
Hallelujah. You've got unlimited time now.
All right. Yeah, my question was about Whitfield Street being a safe and active street and Success Hill being a PSP, but Michelle answered that. So I'm deviating a little bit. The Department of Transport want to go ahead and make it a PSP. But since that other bit's been done down near the river, what has it been, 18 months, 2 years? And everything's been fine. So why don't they just leave it? We're all happy. That's my question.
Thank you. Now, councillors, that beeping that would not cease was 15 minutes of question time being up.
Move an extension.
Councillor Wilson moved, Councillor Gangel seconded. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Yes.
My name's Nicola Clark. I live at 79 Penzance Street and I'm here to ask a question about the 10-point...
differential rates.
Differential rates. So I have a block of land that I've had for many years. It's my superannuation, single income. I don't have a lot of money and I was really shocked, but then I was very angry to read that the possibility of doubling the rates and that rates to be implemented in 5 weeks' time. So I'm not sure where you think that all the people are suddenly going to come out with this money. The reasons given were runoff on the street, antisocial behaviour. Well, I think you get that in this street, and there's no vacant blocks in this street area. So my block is a battle axe block. I can only build one property on it, which is I'm paying you a rent, the council rent every year. I'm paying the rates. You want to double it. So if I build on it, you're going to get less money than you're just trying to get more money out of me. Basically, this is what I'm really protesting about. My block has got a gate over it. There's no antisocial behaviour. There's no runoff from it, and there's no dumping on my land. So the reasons that have been given in the letter of increasing the differential rate are null and void. I've also spoken to Landgate, who've told me that every 3 years they do the valuation rates, and it's likely to go down, which is another reason why the interest rates are going down, because nothing's moving. So my reason, given I've answered all those questions about no, you don't need to do all those things for my land, is how can you justify this? Because it seems like a money grab, and it's discriminating the 188 people who've got their vacant blocks of land for future, and there's no differential between you can build one house on there or it can be 10 houses on there. So how do you justify
So-
this blatant money grab?
So just, I'll dispute the money grab comment, but just to go back to the original question, to begin with, it's a proposal at this point in time. So council is exploring the different ways that we can rate various properties throughout the town. And when there are differential rates proposed, there's a requirement to advertise to the community. Now that requirement is to put an advertisement in the local paper, and that's the extent of our requirement.
Okay.
But council decided that if we were to explore this, we wanted to actually ask the community what they thought. So instead of just putting a small advertisement in a paper somewhere that nobody would see, we decided that we wanted to contact every single person in the town who had a vacant property to give them the opportunity to make comment. We also put it on the town's website. We shared it on our social media pages. So there was a lot of opportunity, and I think that demonstrates that there was a real commitment to letting the community know that this was something that was being considered by council. As I said, it is a proposal at this stage. So tonight you probably, I imagine, looked at the report. So there are a number of different options that have been proposed, including one of which is to defer it and to revisit this and see how we could make that work. So I can't anticipate what the outcome will be, but there's a variety of outcomes that could be presented, that could be
But why are you discriminating against 188 people? Why aren't you sending a letter around to every single ratepayer? Why are you saying only vacant land has to be doubled in their rates? It's the value of the land is not double, it's gone down. So you are discriminating against those people.
So there are a variety of reasons, and I think some people may or may not agree with the reasons that were given. They may apply to some properties more than others, and you're right that in your case maybe it's not as relevant as some others. Again, this is why we were seeking feedback, and we did get a lot of feedback from the community, and I'm sure everybody sitting around the table tonight has read that feedback and is going to take that into their consideration in the decision making. Equally though, as a council, we are responsible to the entire community, and if we see that there are potentially options available to us that could benefit the broader community, then we're going to look into them. We may or may not choose to implement them, but it's something that we are going to explore.
So again, you're just discriminating against the people.
Well, that may be your impression, but I don't think that's what the intention of council was when exploring this option.
But I just sorry.
So one more question, and then we need to move on to someone else. I'm a bit unsure of how you think by hitting people with more rates you're going to encourage them to build, because that doesn't make you go, oh well, I'll get a $200,000 loan to build on it. So I'm just unsure of how this is working, because when I previously came to a meeting a while ago, it was about building units on the oval and using all the green space, which I protested against because I want the green space, and that all went down. But at that time, it was indicated, a lot of people spoke and said, why not build up Old Perth Road, like Maylands, let's get some units up, let's make that vibrant. And we were told, well, we have tried to offer incentives to the owners. And that's my point, is you're offering incentives to those owners, but you don't want to offer incentives. You want people to build, but you don't want to incentivise them. You want to hit them with double rates. So that's a double-edged sword. There are various, as I said before, there are various things that councils can use to incentivise, but there is a limited ability at the moment, and definitely I think the preferred approach in terms of development and so on is to incentivise. It's much better to get people to come along, offer the carrot instead of the stick. So don't disagree with you there at all. I would question though, maybe you're able to clarify about incentives for owners on Old Perth Road. I can't recall anything that there's been an incentive at this point for. No.
It came up when there was a big discussion about using the land on the oval and the reserve to start building on it, and general discussion was why can't we build there?
Definitely,
it was mentioned. Definitely.
I'm not sure how familiar you are with the current Bassendean Our Future process that we've got going on at the moment.
Okay,
but the
that's
town,
fine.
No, just please let me finish.
Sorry.
So we've got our Bassendean Our Future process going on at the moment, which is all about looking at our local planning scheme and strategy, and about how we as a town respond to the state government's infill targets. So there is a pressure on the town to develop in the locations that we have available in the town centre. And we are really keen on encouraging and incentivising development, particularly around the town centre. I think in answer to your question about whether the differential rates would encourage development, it may not, but as you would have seen in the proposal, the objects and reasons that were given weren't all about incentivising development. That may be an outcome, but that wasn't the entirety of the rationale for the proposal. As I said, I'm speaking on behalf of the council's current proposal. When it comes to this item, each person around the table will have the opportunity to speak to their own position on this topic.
Okay, so it's not happening next month, it's still up for discussion?
Nothing has been decided upon at this point. All we have decided upon as a council is to ask the question of the community, is this something you'd support? So until tonight's decision is made...
So it's going to be decided tonight?
Tonight, yes.
Yeah. So we didn't get much notice at the end. It's a done deal.
Thank you. We need to move on to somebody else. Mr. Pearson.
Peter Pearson, River Street, Bassendean. I'd like to turn back to this matter of the PSP and say what I've said to the council before, and that is that this is so unnecessary it makes me want to scream, in that I walk on the road all the time. I never see a car, I never feel in danger, but I wouldn't walk on a PSP unless I absolutely have to, because when I have to, cyclists represent a danger to me. Much and all this, my mate Bruce is there and he wouldn't like to be, but certainly the thought of sharing a PSP with pedestrians and bicycles and children on cycles on a PSP designed for commuting cyclists is just madness, and I would urge the council in the strongest possible terms not to do it, please. I would however, to thank the gentleman, Mr. Judd, who did the safety audit for Main Road, for Department of Transport, in that he included 3 photographs with people in them, 2 of which were pedestrians walking on the road doing exactly what I do. Unfortunately, Mr. Judd then turns his safety audit into something completely irrelevant by talking about high-speed cyclists as 30 kilometres an hour. Well, if the cyclists going down that hill were only going down 30 kilometres an hour, I'd be only too happy. It's just madness, like linking them together on a PSP. I certainly will never walk on it, and I don't think anybody in a local area that knows it would. And I would like just to finish on another note to Bruce. If Ms. Pryor says the cyclists are in favour, I invite the councillors to ask Bruce whether his association is in favour. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Any further questions? Yes, Jill. Sorry, Mrs. Taylor.
Jill Taylor, Anzac Terrace in Success Hill. I just wanted to know, it's obvious that the Department of Transport is very fixated on having the continuous PSP along to Midland. I just wanted to know whether the council has received from many Bassendean residents any complaints that there is a gap. What do the locals, have you had any feedback from the locals that we consider that the gap is something that needs to be filled?
Everyone is shaking their head, so I believe there hasn't been. And I'm not saying this in defence or otherwise of the PSP, but I guess the Department of Transport's position would probably be that yes, the local Bassendean community is one stakeholder, but because it's a network for the whole city, then it wouldn't be the entirety of the consideration.
Yes. Yeah. And just one other point, it's more than just the train users who use that bridge. I'm one of many I see who use it just across the railway line. From one point to another, so I think it's more than what's been quoted, the number of people who use that bridge.
Thank you. Yes. Sorry, I don't know your name.
Geoffrey Gear.
Oh, hello, Mr. Gear. I've spoken to you on the phone.
Yeah, I
think many of you have spoken to me.
And just your address for the minute taker, please.
Yeah, I will. Just one thing before I do. This is being recorded, isn't it?
Oh, sorry, I normally do say that, yes. So all of our meetings are recorded and it's live streamed. I usually say that right at the beginning. It is documented in the agenda, though.
My full name is John Jeffrey Gear, and my wife's name is Christine Merrin Gear. We live at 185 Fife Street, Helena Valley, Perth, Western Australia. We've had a block in Bassendean in Wilson Street, which is the old quarter-acre block. We've had it for many, many years. I bought it from a long-time resident in Bassendean, which was Bob Manick. But I'll get on to the points I'd like in question. I'd like the Mayor, if she could, just to ask the CEO if she's read this document, which was placed on your website. It's not to trick you or anything, it's just a bit that's...
Just for everyone else's benefit, what is the document, Mr. Gear?
It's the one that's on the website with the rationale for looking at levying a differential rate.
For everyone else's benefit, it's the objects and reasons and the additional information around the proposed differential rating. And
my question was, have you seen it?
Of course we have.
Yes. Yep. And you've read it?
Yes.
And you think it's truthful to the point that's highlighted in red? If so, I've got a number of questions I'd just like to ask in relation.
We'll ask the questions anyway.
Okay then. My first one, I'd like clarification as to what extra services the town of Bassendean must provide to our vacant block, 67 Wilson Street, in comparison to our immediate neighbours or other similar properties in the town of Bassendean. You can take that on notice and get back, but okay. The second question, in answer to the topic of illegal dumping, I believe items dumped on one's property were the responsibility of the owners. But am I wrong to assume this, or does the town of Bassendean clean up for landowners? The third question, my understanding of vacant blocks in the town of Bassendean must meet various conditions, e.g. long grass mowed during the summer months, land to be kept in a clean state, no old car bodies, building rubble. I believe that all local bodies have accordingly local bylaws in managing all of the above, through the courts if necessary, by fines, enforcement. I'm at a loss, the fifth one, I'm at a loss as to how the town of Bassendean deals with antisocial behaviour, other than reporting the incident to the relative authorities, which i.e. would be the police. I don't think the rangers would be the ones to really go in and stop a fight that was happening on my block. Not that it has happened. As far as sand blowing onto the street with our vacant block, I've never seen sand blow on the road. The town of Bassendean would employ a mechanical road sweeper to clean all road gutters within the town. But I would be interested to see that if our property on Wilson Street has required any extra cleaning in all the time we've owned it.
So our CEO is taking note of all your questions and we'll take them all on notice. Thank you very much. Were there further questions?
Yes.
Yeah.
I think the town of Bassendean has an obligation to distribute the rates burden equally, fairly. And I don't think by levying a differential rate is going anywhere by the means of doing that. If it is to raise extra money because of a shortfall in the budget, then I don't see why someone that owns a block that is vacant is going to be paying more rates than somebody that owns a substantial sized block on North Road with tennis courts and probably a $1.8 million house, probably $2.7 million 5 years ago. I don't think we should be pitting ratepayers one against another. If we've come to that point, I think it's a sad reflection. And just to sum it up, the town of Bassendean, this isn't a question, it's just a statement. The town of Bassendean should encourage growth within the town by maintaining a positive presence. When speaking with my neighbours and making them aware of the town of Bassendean's reason for introducing a differential rate, they expressed confusion and stated they were appalled at the prospect. The reason the town states above for introducing the differential rate are not based on sound opinion, and some of the reasons have no basis unless the town of Bassendean can show that our block causes extra monetary burden to be placed on the town's budget. It is for the above reasons that I'm opposed to the differential rate. In summary, I'd like to thank the town of Bassendean for providing access to information listed above in relation to the rates levied, and that's in my submission as sent you. Some of the council members were very forthcoming. They didn't once try and stop me accessing information which I legally knew I could, but I say thank you to them for doing that. Other shires haven't made it that easy in the past many years ago. I thank you to all the councillors for taking the time to listen to my concerns. My wife reckons, why do I do it? But I think if we don't do it, who's going to stand up for people? And if it affects one person that causes their marriage to split up or some other untoward event because of that, just the thought of it.
I'm going to have to ask you to wind up pretty quickly.
Yeah, I will. Just the thought of the differential rate in the West Australian, and I think it should have been in the local paper as well, because a lot of us read the local papers now, not the Saturday West. Thank you.
Thank you. Further questions? Okay. Anybody else before Mr Yates has a second question? Okay, Mr Yates, and then if there's nobody else, we'll close question time after Mr Yates's question.
Don Yates, 10 Thompson Road, Success Hill. Thank you. Really, it goes on, a number of points have been raised here tonight about incentivising development or promoting development. I'm reminded of a motion that was passed last year, 11.1 on, I think it was in August last year, by this council, that basically looked at narrowing Lord Street, and it's basically takes on the WAPC, the EMRC, planning, a range of other government agencies, and if you wish to encourage development and whatever, to take on these government departments, and it was reflected in the transport study saying why this was embarked upon. It just raised questions about this council when it came to I guess promoting development and other aspects, and why people might want to do something with their vacant block.
So just in answer to that, Mr Yates, that particular proposal came directly out of our transport study that the consultants had given us advice would be a suitable outcome for that particular road. So that is where that was originated.
Well, I think you actually, when you read the transport study, and you also look at things like the documents like the EMRC, when it comes to the RITS scheme, the Regional Infrastructure Transport Strategy, and also the town of Bassendean's own road hierarchy of 2010, it makes Lord Street a major street.
So Mr Yates, do you have another question at this point, please?
Well, one other question, I guess, going with that, and it raises the question about recognising heritage sites and whatever. Basically, in 2015, the council supported the idea that there should be plans for the neighbourhood community redevelopment implementation plans for the 0 to 800 levels, or around the 3 railway stations. But since 2015, this has not happened. So if you want people to do something with their vacant blocks, you need to actually implement some of these things that you've spoken about, and that's part of the grief. And I guess that's why also people in the community are a bit upset that we've spent some $2,000 on having speeches written in the last period of months. Now, if councillors aren't competent enough to write speeches for themselves, why are the ratepayers being asked to fork out $2,000? There were two amounts, one for about $1,782 and a subsequent amount which brings it over $2,000. If
so Mr Yates, your time has already expired.
Well, I'm just saying is I think maybe some of the ratepayers should expire as well and join the Congo line.
Okay, Mr Yates, please sit down and we'll move on now to closing public question time. Item 4.3 is addresses by members of the public. So this is the opportunity, if you have something to speak to on a particular item on tonight's agenda, each individual has up to 3 minutes to speak to that item. So if you would like to take that opportunity, now is your chance. So Mr King. Thank you.
Thanks,
Graham King.
Can
not sure this will reach.
Can you tip it up any further?
Is that good? Okay, Graham King, 15 North Road, Bassendean. I'd just like to make a comment or an address on item 1012 on the Sexhill PSP. Firstly, I acknowledge and understand that some of you in the council or councillors are probably suffering issue fatigue on this. I get it, I understand it. But I'd also, if it's any consolation, it's harder for those of us who are outside the tent. It is also frustrating for us. I also like to, if you can pass the thanks on to Michelle. It was great to actually hear some detail coming through on what the thinking is and some of the reasons for the designs put forwards. It's the first opportunity we had that detail, so please can you pass on that thanks. I also understand that some of you may feel that there's a group of people who are just anti everything. And being anti, they've hopped from one issue to another. I did hear Councillor Brown earlier make the comments and saying first it was trees and then it's safety. I'd just like, in response to that, refer you to page 27 of the briefing notes of the February briefing in 20th of February 2018, and also question the claim of strong support. Those notes say that 46 people out of 69, 2/3, did not support the proposal. That is not strong support. The feedback included from the people that didn't support it was further investigation in protecting the existing vegetation, cycle lanes on the road, make railway parade a bike boulevard, and leave the verge as is. And at the time, a graphic of what's been called the fourth option was submitted. I know that, I did it, and a person from the PTA called me to discuss it and support it. So I'd just like to emphasise there is nothing new in what is being raised now. So for the record, please do not say this is something new that's come up. And there hasn't been any hopping from one issue to another. We've been very consistent. With regards to the safety issue and the safety audit, I'd like to put on the record, I think, the strong alignment between myself and other people and what Michelle was saying, where safety is our main concern. And on the audit said that the fourth option of a safe active street was requested and discarded on the basis it doesn't cater for all abilities due to going on the road and off. I'd like to point out there's 3 users on that road, as other people have. There's pedestrians, there's cyclists and cars. And we've got no data, which is an issue on its own, but anecdotally we know that cars are the lowest volume. The highest volume is likely cyclists, and in the middle are pedestrians. The hierarchy of safety, you want to separate those different users.
That's your 3 minutes, so
I'll wind up. So when we look at separating it, we've been focusing on, and the Department of Transport want to focus on cycling separated and pedestrians from cars. I would suggest to you, in this instance, being such a quiet street, that we should really be focusing on separating cyclists from pedestrians and use the road to do that. And it really questions this fixation on the standard PSP. We should be able to accommodate it to the situation that exists. So please can you consider that in your deliberations. Thank you.
thank you. Mr. Bridges?
Paul Bridges, West Road. I'm addressing item 10.14, which is the differential rating, and I would compliment councillors for taking on this as an issue. It's across the board with most metropolitan councils. There's a few things I'd like to raise though. Firstly, a differential rating on industrial land. I'm very much supportive of that, particularly given that this town has a parcel of land in the industrial area which is the size of Bassendean Oval, which is used to store waste, which should be removed, subdivided, and industries and businesses built there that provide jobs and get the economy going. In terms of The commercial, again, I'm fully supportive of differential rate on commercial to encourage development. We've got land sitting up the top end of Old Perth Road that's been land banked and no developments occurring on that, and it's holding the town up. So if we can get a bit of money out of those people, all the better. I will point out that in our town planning scheme, we should have a structure plan for the top end of Old Perth Road, and it's stated in the scheme that can be done by the owners of the land or by the council. Now let's get real, the owners of the land will never do that. One of the reasons that the strategic planner was employed was to do structure plans. Now unfortunately it never happened, but in terms of encouraging development at the top end of Old Perth Road, the council needs to bite the bullet and develop a structure plan which will facilitate that development. In terms of the residential stuff, I think you should probably defer that at the moment, and I'll only state one reason because I've got 3 minutes. The motion that I referred to before about the municipal heritage inventory, the third part of that, well, a part of that motion was that the preparation and implementation of heritage guidelines for future heritage areas within the town of Bassendean. Now, when the MHI was done, the residents of Kenny Street were all destined to have their houses as a category 2. Now they objected to that, they were concerned, but they had all put the effort into restoring their homes. All the houses presented visually well to the street, and they were very happy for a heritage guidelines for those areas that had reached their development potential already. Their big concern was the vacant blocks. Now, one of the unintended consequences of advancing a differential rate on residential properties is that some of the owners might just say, oh, bugger it, I will just get a little spec home, put it on there, and it will break up the continuity of the street. So I would suggest that you go ahead, get the heritage guidelines in place before that, so that you avoid that situation. And I'll just wind up. And yeah, so get that out of the way. Two of the things that this community strongly has advocated in its community strategic plan: green open space and maintain the character of the town. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes. And then you, Ms Jacobson.
Genevieve Berry.
Sorry, what was that?
Genevieve Berry, 36 Anzac Terrace, Bassendean. I'm speaking on the PSP. I want to back up what Graham has already said and further add that I really think that this provides an opportunity for this council pardon me, to show some leadership here in questioning DOT's insistence on a single model for a PSP project. This gives you and us the opportunity to try something a little different. It's still a PSP. It will still provide continuous access and shared use. So I'm suggesting that what we do tonight, or what you would do tonight, is remove agenda item 10.12 and defer it to the September meeting, when you can, during which time you can conduct some further due consideration of option 4. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms Jacobson?
Nonnie Jacobson, Spartan Parade, Bassendean. I'd just like to comment on items 2.0 and 10.12 with the same thing, the road and footpath situation at Railway Parade. I think I'm fully supportive of cycling on the road, and that's what I would continue to do regardless of what happens to that street. And if the footpath really isn't adequate for pedestrians, it's the town of Bassendean's responsibility to see to it that the footpath is actually suitable. I'd like to make comments on 2 other items. Item 10.2, which is the JDAP application for 22 multiple dwellings just across the railway line here. I think that's a really good example of why people might think that having differential rates or incentives for development is necessary, because we've got a really large vacant block in what is essentially the centre of town. And I'd like to say I'm very supportive of the recommendation to not approve that going forward, because it's already shown that that's another example of land banking happening instead of what potentially could be a really good development. What they have proposed would have been substandard, so I'm very happy that you guys are not approving it, hopefully. And about item 10.9, which is the European house borer infestation at Success Hill Reserve, we recently walked the reserve and had a really good look at all of that, and I think it's fantastic that the town is going to resolve to actually maintain the trees rather than cut them down, because they provide excellent forage and roosting for Carnaby's black cockatoos and red-tailed black cockatoos. And every mature tree in this town really is a valuable asset, and we should be doing what we can to look after them.
Thank you. Anybody else? Yes, Mr. Yates?
Don Yates, 10 Thompson Road, Success Hill. Just a few points really about implementation. I was one of the people some 8 years ago or thereabouts who voted to have the 3 wards with 3 councillors per ward removed as part of the amalgamation process. I think we're getting to a stage now when it comes to representation, be it bike paths, be it other sort of processes, that maybe we need to look at a situation of introducing 4 wards with 2 councillors in each and a popular elected mayor, with 2 wards at either side of the railway line, because it comes back to representation of the community who are saying we're not getting the representation that maybe we need. So I think the council should consider maybe even putting that as a question as part of the postal elections this year. And I'm not sure what other referendum questions might be considered.
I'd just like to make a comment on that. Of course, when there are wards in place, the representatives from those wards are elected from within that community, but then the requirement is, after councillors have been elected, that they represent the entire town. So I understand your point, but councillors sitting around this table should be representing the entire local government area and not just the area that they're coming from. Okay, anybody else that would like to speak? Okay, and then we'll close the addresses by members of the public. We'll move on to item 5, which is confirmation of minutes. So 5.1, do we have a mover to receive the minutes of the Ordinary Council meeting held in June? Councillor Brown moved, seconded Councillor Mikachuk. All those in favour? It's carried unanimously. 5.1b, that the minutes are confirmed as a true record. Do I have a mover? Somebody? Councillor Gangel, seconded Councillor Brown. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Item 6 is announcements. Hold on 2 seconds. There are a few things that I just wanted to make note of. First of all, as our CEO mentioned, item 10.10 on the agenda tonight has been withdrawn, so that related to the Eden Hill Underground Power Project. And I also want to take the opportunity to acknowledge a couple of important people. So firstly, as many of you would know, we recently had the Festival of Local Business, and that was under the guidance of William Barry, who's our Senior Economic Development Officer, who has since ceased their employment with the town, but who did a wonderful job on behalf of the town, but also a group of community members who volunteered their time. So we had Kim Veal, Pat, I don't know how to pronounce his surname, Eichenboom, Angie Martin, Amanda Kerr, Matt Cowan, Michael Gordon and Daniel Amato, and I just wanted to formally express the town's thanks to those individuals for their time and effort that they put into such a wonderful event. And lastly, I would just like to acknowledge Mr. Ken Cardy. Even my phone is acknowledging you. I do not know what has got into that this evening, but Ken finishes with the town and is retiring next Friday, I believe. And you started with the town, I'm told, in 2007. As the Tender and Contracts Coordinator, and were appointed to your current position in 2011 and has continued in that position up until now. And Ken has worked closely with many members of our community, and I've only ever heard very positive things about the work that Ken has done, and you'll be greatly missed. Thank you for everything that you have contributed, and we wish you much happiness and lots of adventure in the time away from work, enjoying with your family and your wife. So thank you very much, Ken. So maybe we can... Item 7 is petitions. I don't believe there are any tonight. Item 8, declarations of interest. Councillors, are there any items that you need to declare? There's no business deferred from the previous meeting, so that takes us to item 10, which is the reports on tonight's agenda. So the reports that I currently have coming out of en bloc are 10.4, 10.7, 10.8, as I said 10.10 is withdrawn, 10.11, 10.12, oh my goodness, 10.13 and 10.14. Are there any others that councillors would like out? Councillor Mikachuk?
10.9.
10.9, the European House Borrower. Councillor Gangel?
10.19.
Accounts for payment?
Yes, thank you.
Any further? Okay, in that case, do I have a mover to carry the remainder of reports on block? So moved Councillor Brown, seconded Councillor Gangel. Is there anybody against? Okay. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. So then we'll go to item 10.4, which is the amended application for the development approval for the concrete batching plant. Are there any questions for the staff? No questions? Councillor Clinton?
Yeah, just a process question maybe. Is it possible in these kinds of situations, given that they're now going to have carte blanche for operating hours and the dust emission will be covered under state legislation, I'm just wondering if it's possible to have some kind of trial period? Sorry, this is a late question.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It would be very unusual to approve an application of like this subject to a trial period.
Okay. Councillor Hamilton?
Obviously, this particular development has had multiple amendments over the last year or so. So given that we're now going to presumably have unlimited production, unlimited trading hours, etc. Can you foresee any more potential amendments to the original conditions? Is there anywhere else that they can go to actually expand what they're doing?
Thank you through the Chair. Councillors will note that there is one further application with the Town's administration that we would intend to deal with administratively if Council were to approve this application. That would be application number 5 for the site, so it's not anticipated at this point in time that there would be further applications, but that can't be discounted.
Thank you. Any further questions? Okay then, in that case we've got an officer recommendation in front of us. Is there someone who would like to move the recommendation or an alternative? Councillor Gangel's moved. Is there a seconder? Councillor Brown? Is there anybody against? Councillor Hamilton, would you like to debate?
I only have a very simple statement.
Councillor Gangel, would you like to open debate?
Thank you, Your Worship. Look, the officers have put a recommendation here. Clearly, the officers have looked. I have every faith and every confidence in the officers that if there were any means of objection, the officers certainly would have brought that forward to Council. That is simply I'm trusting that is simply not the case. This is the best option that the officers have been able to work up for Council's consideration. As I said, I have full faith in our officers. We have seen what our neighbouring council went through in trying to oppose an application that was ultimately seen as legitimate. They got financial penalties against them. Not only that, but if we don't approve the officer recommendation, the town gets financial penalties against us with the SAT appeal and us needing to employ specialists to represent the council. So there certainly is penalties for the town and for the ratepayer that would have to be borne should councillors see fit not to support the officer recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Gangel. Councillor Brown?
Yes, thank you, Your Honour. Councillor Quinton brought up the idea of a trial period, and my understanding is that we have gone through somewhat of a trial period. The batching plant has been operating to its capacity that's previously been agreed. There has been no catastrophes, there has been no dust issues, there has been no noise issues, and there has been no complaints. And that has been, for me, essentially a trial period in my determination to agree with this. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Councillor Hamilton?
Quite simply, I'd like to thank the staff for all the work that you've put into this, and I understand and thank the councillors, knowing full well that there's very little that we can do to oppose this. However, call this, if you like, a protest vote, because it was said when this proposal first came to council, before I was even on council, and the community opposed this, it was said that they would just expand, the proponent would just expand and get more and more, and that the buffer zones that had been put forward by the EPA really are irrelevant. And it's quite a shame that our state government has so disempowered the Environmental Protection Authority that really anything that they put in place is actually irrelevant. And so this is simply a protest vote in opposition, knowing full well that this will pass. Thank you.
Anyone else would like to speak? Councillor Wilson?
Thank you, Your Worship. I too would like to thank the staff. We had the benefit of a very detailed briefing at our council briefing last week, where we were able to ask all sorts of detailed questions about this proposal. I share Councillor Hamilton's concerns about the Trojan horse nature of this application. Coming in with a very small proposal, getting that through and then expanding it as if they were surprised somehow at the need to expand it, I think is less than desirable way to engage with the community. For the reasons Councillor Gaingel spelt out, I will be voting for it, but I just want to put on the public record my disappointment at the fact that they weren't upfront with us at the start.
Thank you. Any further speakers? Councillor Quinton?
I too will be voting for this, only because we've been put in between a rock and a hard place. This is nothing short of mission creep in terms of a project that has been forced upon our community. There was great community angst when this application came initially before us, and there is advice that has come from the City of Bayswater that some of the assessments that were done by the proponent were not done to complete satisfaction. Some of those being reverse beepers have not been captured in the acoustic assessment, which means it may impact on the noise levels. The dust management plan does not indicate any dust monitoring or sprinkler system to suppress dust on site, and the list goes on. The hours of operation and intensity will impact on the transport. So unfortunately, we would be copped with a huge legal bill if we do not vote for this tonight. But like Councillor Hamilton and Councillor Wilson, this is not the way that local governments should be treated.
Anyone further? Councillor Gansha, did you want to say anything? Okay, so we'll put that to the vote. So all those in favour? Councillor Wilson, Gangel, Mikuchuk, Quinton, Brown and McLennan, and against is Councillor Hamilton, and that is carried. Thank you, Christian, for all your work on this. It's greatly appreciated. 10.7 is the adoption of the Town of Bassendean parking local law. Is there anything that you wish to say, Shana? Any questions for Shana? Thank you. If there are no questions, is there a mover for the officer recommendation? Councillor Quinton, seconded Councillor Brown. Anyone against? All those in favour? That is carried unanimously. 10.8, the parking restrictions proposed for Troy Street, Bassendean, to address some of the road safety issues around school drop-off and pick-up time. We have an officer recommendation. We also have an amendment that's been proposed by Councillor Quinton.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to give a little bit of time for the Anzac Terrace Primary School community to be advised of the changes. so that they can make alternative arrangements and it's not such a huge shock to them. So I know that we're not that kind of community anyway. We don't just go and ticket people for the fun of it. But I just wanted to add B, request the Town's Rangers initially utilise education rather than enforcement to allow parents from the primary school sufficient time to be alerted of the parking changes, and C, request the principal of Anzac Terrace Primary School advise parents of the parking changes and that penalties could apply.
Shana's nodding. Councillor Hamilton?
Seconded.
Oh, okay, so Councillor Quinton's moved it, Councillor Hamilton has seconded it with the amendment. Amy, you've got the amendment there, do you? Yep. Is there anybody against? All those in favour? That is unanimous with Councillor Gangel out of the room. We'll move on to 10.9, which is the European House Borer. Councillor Mikachuk, did you have...
Yeah, I just pulled this out for a question more than anything. In the officer's report, it says that, if I've read it correctly, that there already is a management plan, and I just want to confirm that is the case, and just, if it is the case, to see if it can be tabled at the River Parks committee.
Is that something that you can answer now?
Through the Chair, no, I'm unaware if there's a management plan, but we can bring that through to the Chair. The officer's on maternity leave at the moment, so.
And then potentially it could be dealt with administratively if there was a report, it could come to the committee.
You comfortable with that?
Yep.
Any further questions? Okay then, question or
the
moving?
officer's recommendation.
Okay, so Councillor Hamilton has moved. Is there a seconder? Councillor Mikachuk. Anybody against? All those in favour? Carried unanimously again with Councillor Gangel out of the room. 10.11 Safe Active Street on Whitfield Street. Are there questions? Councillor Wilson?
Thank you, Worship. When this proposal originally came to Council, I had concerns about the impacts on parking at the Bassendean Primary School and impacts on parking available for the small businesses at the corner of Whitfield Street and Old Perth Road. I was just wondering if staff would be able to describe some of the ways those two concerns have been taken into consideration in the further development of this plan.
It's up through the Chair. There's no loss of parking up near the business end of the Safe Active Street. Down near the school, there is some loss of parking. It's minor. It's the trade-off is to try and maintain as the Safe Active Street whilst the heavy parking's not there, so outside of the peak school times, which we'd like to maintain. In the original version, I think there was loss of 9 parking bays. There is ample parking in the area, and we understand that people want to park as close to the school as possible. So we've reduced that, and I can just check the documents now, but I believe that's down to loss of 4 parking bays.
Thank you.
Thank you. A supplemental question. There was some discussion during one of the council briefing sessions about this project, about the desirability to include planting areas or deep root zones so that we could ensure that we put as many shade trees in the project as possible. I was wondering if that's been given consideration.
Yes, through the Chair, we did provide some. We've got some plans where we can provide some deep rooting planting for some trees for the area, so that'll be incorporated into the design.
Any further questions? Councillor Quinton?
I understand that we're not at the stage where we're talking about construction yet, but when is it envisaged that this would go to construction? Do they have a time frame on that?
So just to clarify though, this project will be managed by the town of Bassendean for construction? Yes.
Okay. Yes. My only concern is that construction not happen during the school term. So if we're project managing it, that we can set that and we don't need to put that in a council motion.
So I guess Councillor Quinton's concern is around if we're doing construction around the school in particular, that we want to avoid construction overlapping with school drop-off and pick-up times, which is going to cause a lot of conflict.
Huge.
So, yeah.
It would need to be done in the summer holidays.
Yeah, we can aim for summer holidays. Yeah.
Right. And do I need to put that as a, given that we're project managing? You've got it? Okay, thanks.
We'll put that in.
So I'm not sure what you're saying here. So you're suggesting you would like it in the motion?
We should include it in the motion, yeah. We'll make sure of that.
Councillor Wilson?
Thank you, Your Worship. The first version of the plans for this project were distributed widely throughout the community, and an extensive public consultation process was carried out. Is there currently any plans to get back to those people who are engaged in that consultation with the updated plans so that they can see whether their concerns are taken into account or not?
Yes, through the chair, that's the next step in the process. Once this is, if it goes through council, is that we would begin the final engagement process with the PTA, with the most affected residents.
So just before you finish, so just on that point, the current officer recommendation is seeking approval for the design for construction. Councillors will note that I've also circulated an alternative which proposes that we go back to the affected members of the community, so primarily the school, the PNC, the local businesses, the residents on that street, as well as any other community members who have provided feedback during the initial consultation process prior to council endorsing the plans for construction. Councillor Wilson?
Thank you, Worship. One last question. The state government came to the town with this idea, as they did with the Broadway project. A Broadway project, the state government is wanting to manage and project manage, and yet this project they want the town to. Have they given any rationale for the different treatment of the two projects?
Through the chair, I'm unaware of any rationale, although I am have worked in these groups for a while, and I think the departments, the PTA, Main Roads and the DOT are looking at different models and trying to establish the most efficient model that brings in community engagement, efficiency of spending funds and outcomes on the ground. And I think that's the drivers.
An A/B test.
Just following on from Councillor Wilson's question, I had a query around the activation, because from conversations with representatives from DOT, they talk about the construction but then also the activation of the Safe Active Street, and I imagine that's, whether it's things along the actual street itself or activities that encourage people to use the new infrastructure. I'm just curious as to how that works, because if we've managed the project, do they then anticipate coming back in and leading the activation?
Through the chair, yes, they continue to be involved. It's not, just a handball over to the local government and they wipe their hands of it. So they are to continue involvement to make these projects work and get the best bang for buck. Yep.
Thank you. Councillor Ganji, did you have a question?
Yes, thank you, Worship. Just on your alternative,
yes.
I'm just wondering, because you talk about final consultation on the detailed designs. Now, what scope is there for changes to be made to what we've been presented? Because my understanding is there's not a great deal of scope, so you don't want to give residents thinking if we're going to go out and consult them, or if you don't want the loss of, for example, of the 4 parking bays, we can redesign the whole thing, which wouldn't be
So my reason for putting forward this proposal was because I've been present during the consultation that happened originally on this project. And I must say, DOT actually did a really good job. There was a meeting down in the community hall. But one of the things that was assured to the community at the time was that their feedback would be taken on board, and the design would be reflective of that, which I think they have done. But there was also assurances that if there were any particular features outside individual residents' homes or the school, that there would be the opportunity to discuss them specifically once the designs had been drawn. So from DOT's presentation to us recently, it was clear that there was still scope to do that, but I didn't feel that the current resolution allowed it to come back to us to make sure that we were satisfied that those conversations were reflected in any changes that were possible. So the proposal that I've put forward doesn't really change what they're intending to do, other than to solidify that they'll bring it back to us so that we can be satisfied that the concerns have been addressed before approving it for construction. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Any further questions? Okay, well in that case I'll read out the alternative that I've proposed. So, sorry about the length here. So, that Council 1 receives and approves the design of the Whitfield Safe Active Street for the purpose of final consultation on the detailed designs with residents of Whitfield Street, Bassendean Primary School and PNC, businesses located on Whitfield Street and any community members who provided feedback during the initial consultation. 2, approves further community engagement on the Whitfield Safe Active Street as outlined in this report. 3, requests that where possible deep root zones be incorporated into vegetated slow points to allow for the planting of additional shade trees. 4, requests that the town undertake street tree planting in alignment with the town's target of 70% canopy cover of road reserves on verges along the west side of Whitfield Street during the 2020 winter planting season to further improve walkability of the safe active street. 5, requests a further report be presented to Council following consultation on the detailed designs, outlining any further feedback, any proposed changes and seeking approval of the design for construction. And I've added a 6 points from what you've got in front of you based on the discussion this evening. Endorses construction during the school holiday period to minimise disruption to the school community. Have you got that, Amy? Yeah. So I've moved the alternatives. Is there a seconder for the alternative? Councillor Quinton. Is there anybody against? All those in favour? Councillor Wilson. Carried unanimously.
Change your position.
Sorry?
No, I just wanted to cancel.
1012 Success Hill PSP. Questions for the staff? Councillor Wilson.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. Just picking up on the questions that I'd asked previously of the State Government Department representative in relation to survey results, were staff privy to the survey results, or were they all managed by the State Government, the individual survey?
So you're talking about this recent...
Yes.
Yeah, through the Chair, we were privy to the survey results, but it was managed by the State Government.
I asked the question of the State Government representative whether there was any sense of why the 39% of people chose no alignment at all. Just wondering if you were able to pick up on whether it was because they didn't want the project to go ahead at all, or whether there was interest in a fourth option that wasn't presented.
Yep. Through the Chair, I can only assume, and my assumption was they didn't want it to go ahead. That's my assumption of the majority of the non-respondents.
I've been advised that what's been described as the fourth option, or the alignment on the road, was presented to the department and to town staff in January 2018. It's an alignment, I understand, which is on the road rather than being a principal shared path. Has the town received any formal correspondence from the state government as to why the fourth option would not be possible?
Through the Chair, I believe that answer is what Michelle described tonight, in that they have that view of the PSP, and that's a big driver for them to connect that PSP up for the underconfident or the not so confident rider.
Thank you. So I asked the state government representative whether they've had any correspondence with or communication with the state member, seeing as this is a state government election commitment. Has the state member been consulted about this as to what his preferred option would be?
Through the Chair, I believe his preferred option is the PSP, option 3.
Councillor Quinton?
Something I should have asked Michelle, is there anything prohibiting cyclists who prefer to continue to ride on the road from doing that?
To the Chair, I'd have to have a closer look at the designs, but narrowing the road would limit that somewhat to its current, narrowing the road from its current state. I'm not, I can't recall off the top of my head if it has ramps coming on and off the pram ramp to the road. I can't recall that if it does, but it's possible that that could be incorporated into a final design when that's done.
I'd be very surprised if there weren't pram ramps at the exit to the station. That would seem to be...
I just can't recall seeing it as I'm standing.
I know that there is one outside the footbridge. I wasn't sure if there was another one at the end of the cul-de-sac. I should have asked Michelle.
I suppose just having a quick look at the design, it does show pram ramps on there, so that, but these are only sort of representative designs, so it's possible that they could still get on and off onto the road
Further
from the path.
Oh, sorry. Further questions? Councillor Mitchell?
Yeah, I know the administration's had a chance to discuss with the Department of Transport this matter in length, and I'm just wondering if it's the view that there are any other options that weren't presented here that they may be open to.
Certainly we've talked about the do nothing option, the safe active street option. Both of those were ruled out. Also talked about the potential to expand the footpath. That would obviously be dangerous for cyclists so close to the driveway. So there has been quite an exhaustive list of options discussed, put on the table.
Thank you.
Councillor Wilson?
Thank you, Worship. The representative from the Department of Transport said that the drawings that we've been provided with for options 2 and 3 at least were indicative drawings rather than detailed final designs. And I note some of the questions from the community go to safety of the pedestrian cyclist interface. And I also note the verbal submission from the representative from the Department of Transport saying that presently detailed design would be done and then it would proceed to construction. Would it be possible for the town to engage in further community consultation once the detailed design for the other options, if they're approved by council, were made available, just to alleviate any concerns people might have about the pedestrian cycling interface?
Yep. To the Chair, I'd have no objection to that.
Councillor Hamilton?
I heard earlier in the night I can't remember who it was, someone said that the pathway on the other side of the road was not particularly adequate. So my question is, for those people who don't wish to use the PSP, pedestrians, is there potential to perhaps upgrade the footpath across the road to make it more user-friendly? I'm assuming that some of that might be for prams rather than pedestrians. I've walked that path and have no problem, but I don't know. Maybe it is prams, I'm not sure. Do you know what the path is, the quality of the path is on the opposite side of the road or not?
I can't. I have been on site. I can't recall the quality of the path at the moment. But
So that was me that made that comment, and I didn't mean to imply it was substandard. I guess what I was saying was that it's quite a narrow path and there's a lot of vegetation very close to the actual pathway. So I don't know whether I would need to have a look at it, but I imagine if that path was widened, that it may require removal of some of the vegetation there as well, which could be a problem.
Okay. I'm not sure whether it's too narrow or whether it's just uneven. It might be just uneven. My recollection is that there's some slightly uneven parts in it, but I don't recall it being so narrow that you couldn't traverse it easily. But it does occur to me that perhaps for those people who don't wish to use the PSP, perhaps upgrading that footpath might be a solution that may work. I don't know, I'm just throwing it out there.
Through the Chair, we can take that on board and investigate that.
Any further questions? Okay. So we have an officer recommendation or an alternative or amendment if anybody would like to propose one of them. Councillor Wilson?
The benefit of seeing an alternative that's been circulated and would ask whether you would move that if you would consider a slight alteration to one of the sections.
I'm not necessarily the one who's moving it, but
Maybe you can just tell us about your amendment.
With your indulgence?
Of course.
In the previous item, we just moved to go back to the community with the updated detailed designs as a courtesy, if nothing else. I'm personally of the view that we should also do the same with this project, given the interest that's generated. I think that an additional stage could be inserted, which is once we've received the detailed design of whatever option council decides to approve, that we then take that detailed design back to those people who participated in the survey to see if any concerns that were raised about pedestrian safety have been addressed.
So in the officer recommendation we have point 4, and in the alternative that you've got before you has point 9, which is the same, I think. Where, sorry. Where are we?
Point 9.
Point 7 on the officer recommendation and point 9, which says improves further engagement to be undertaken by the town by your say in a local letterbox drop to outline the purpose of the recent consultation, advise the community of the outcome, and to allow any further feedback on the preferred option 3. So in addition to that, you're suggesting another round of consultation once detailed design has been completed. Is that correct?
Yes, and also I would seek to amend point 3, which currently says approves the community's preference for option 3, and change it to words that says notes the result of the survey of 76 people, which indicated that 48% of those surveyed preferred option 3. And that we could save...
Just hold on a moment. How are you going, Amy?
So point 3 is...
would read, notes the result of the survey of 76 people, which indicated that 48% of those surveyed preferred option 3. My intended effect being to not approve it at this stage, but to have approval happen at a later point once we've received the detailed design on option 3 and spoken to the community about how that pedestrian interface would work.
Okay, so our CEO is just drawing to my attention that at the moment there's a current council resolution from February 2018 where council approved in principle the concept plan, which now relates to option 1, and that whether councillors wanted to go with the officer recommendation, the alternative or something else, the rescission would need to be in there if we're approving a different plan, but if we are not approving a different plan, that rescission wouldn't need to happen now. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, because essentially that's just
So the reason being that at the moment we've got a commitment to the PSP project, but you're suggesting we wouldn't want to rescind that at this point without having another alternative that we're committed to. Okay. Okay. Question, Councillor Gadgil?
No.
Okay.
I'm happy to move the officer recommendation with Councillor Wilson's suggested changes to point 3.
Okay, hold on. So Councillor Wilson, I believe, was speaking to the alternative, not the officer recommendation. Is that correct?
I was.
Yes.
Sorry, hang on.
Okay. Let's just go back for a moment. He said, let's go deal with the officer recommendation. Do we have anybody that wants to move the officer recommendation as it's written? There's no mover, so that lapses.
Well, I'm happy with the proposed changes, but anyway.
Okay, well, you didn't jump on that just then.
Everyone's just thinking.
Okay. All right, councillors. So we have an alternative here that Councillor Wilson has just spoken to. Do we have a mover for the alternative motion?
I will move it with the amendments.
Okay.
Oh, now I'm very confused.
So, would you like to clearly articulate what your amendment is?
I would, before I do so, I would just like to seek a clarification on the point 4 about the rescission and whether that would also be desirable to remove at this stage.
Well, it depends on what wording you are putting in.
And I apologise to all concerned for the confusion. We're doing this on the run and this is democracy in the raw. However, we're changing point 3 to say that we note the results of the survey.
Can you read it from the beginning, thank you?
Just number 3.
Just number 3.
1 and 2 are the same.
Yeah, but
So for the benefit of the members of the community who are here, at the moment, we're talking about identical to the officer recommendation, point 1 and 2 remaining the same, and then we get to point 3 in the officer recommendation, and that is where Councillor Wilson is speaking to a slight change in the wording.
Yes, and that slight change at point 3 would be to read instead, note the result of the survey of 76 people which indicated that 48% of those surveyed preferred option 3, which involves reducing the road width for the length of the principal shared path to minimise use of the verd space and impact on existing vegetation.
Just hold for a moment. Hold on a moment. So what we're doing though at the moment then, Councillor Wilson, is we then have a commitment to the previous design, so which is now option 1, but we haven't actually requested detailed designs be done on option 3.
Yes. So I would then propose that words be inserted that says that we request the Department of Transport then do detailed designs on option 3.
Yeah. Okay, how are you going, Amy? Okay, so our CEO is just informing me that unless we commit to to option 3, then the DOT will not progress with detailed designs. So just hold on a moment. Question, Councillor Hamilton?
That was going to be my question. How can you go to detailed designs without committing to an option? So that was my question, but you've just answered it.
So the normal process is you would do the detailed design and then you could make that available to the community?
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
So hold on a moment. Question, Councillor Badger?
Yes. So I was supporting the officer recommendation because of point 8 supports a follow-up report being presented to Council at the August 2019 meeting outlining any further feedback from the community and next steps. So, but from what you've just said then, so I was happy to look into alternatives being the month between now and August. Perhaps the item could just be deferred until August. But with this though, with what you're saying, they wouldn't have had the design, the detailed designs done. So what exactly were we going to go to the community with?
So the community has asked for indication of the survey results, which we've provided, as well as the safety audit, which we've also attached to the council papers. So the idea is that they would be made available to the community before we move forward with the project.
Are you asking a question or are you continuing your...
I was continuing.
Yeah, so Councillor Gandra has a question.
Yeah, sorry. Just further to that, I'm just a little bit confused though with the point 8, because basically there's largely no change then that could be made. So I don't see the point in the officer recommendation for point 8. It's really a moot point.
Yeah, so the community is actually asked to receive the survey results.
I understand
they were
that,
only
yes.
made available on Friday.
Yes.
So the idea is that they would be out for 3 weeks, so the community has a chance to digest them, as well as the safety audit. So if there are any final comments from the community, council would have the opportunity of considering those before then moving forward. So any final comments would come back.
Okay, Councillor Wilson.
Thank
Where
you.
are you up to?
And I guess it's a sequencing issue that I'm trying to prize apart here, which is we can't go to the community until we have detailed designs so that people are dealing with what will be constructed rather than artist visualisations, which is what we currently have. And so we're up to point 3. The issue of rescission. Happy to take guidance at this point, but what words would be necessary to satisfy the Department of Transport to go ahead with the detailed design for option 3?
Perhaps something along the lines of in principle support for option 3 on the basis of further community consultation post the detailed design?
Yes, and then also what I'd like to do is get written clarification from the Department of Transport as to why what has been described as option 4 is not possible in their view. I heard the oral submissions given by the staff member, but I would prefer to see a position in writing from a director or someone delegated by the director before I made a decision as to whether or not that was an impossibility.
Okay, so let's just get some clarity around where we're at this point. So we've got point 1 and point 2 as is written in the officer recommendation.
Mm-hmm.
We've got point 3, which is noting the results of the survey as you articulated.
Mm-hmm.
And are you suggesting an inclusion of in-principle support for option 3 at this point?
Yes, that the town provides in-principle support for option 3 and requests the Department of Transport to undertake detailed designs of option 3.
Sorry, okay, are we still on number 3? So you've just
We need
changed
a
number 3.
standing order.
Hold on. Can you continue and then we'll get clarification once you've completed.
Sorry, in answer to Councillor Hamilton's question, this would be an alternate for point 4.
Okay.
So instead of having the rescission motion at this stage, we would have a new point 4, which is that we communicate in principle support for option 3 on the basis that this was the preferred option from the survey process.
Councillor Wilson, can I suggest then possibly if we exclude the section about requesting detailed designs because they're not going to complete them within the next month, but if what you're requesting is that we're merely noting it and we're going to take out the concept plans in the next month to come back, continue to have the report come back in August so that people have had the chance to comment on the safety audit and the concept design. Is this what you're suggesting?
I would be comfortable going that way so long as we also wrote to the Department of Transport formally requesting a response to what has been described as option 4 so that we get a considered position from the department rather than an oral
So
submission.
just with the remainder of the document you've got in front of you, is your intention to keep what is currently listed as point 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 and 10?
Yes, because that relates to the green route, which may or may not happen at some point.
Okay, and we're suggesting a point 11 that is going to be contacting the Department of Transport to seek.
Yes, seeking a formal response
Amy,
on whether the fourth option, which is essentially a road alignment, is possible, because we've not yet received formal advice about that option.
Okay. All right. So, did you have a question, Councillor Mikachuk? No. All right. What we might do is I might get Amy to read that out so people are confident with what it says, and then we'll see if there's a seconder. If not, we can deal with that in a moment. Okay. Are you ready, Amy, or would you mind reading the entirety from the beginning, please?
Okay. Council 1 notes the recent consultation undertaken by the Department of Transport in May 2019 since Council's earlier resolution OCM 10/18. 2 notes that following feedback from the community concerning the loss of trees, 2 additional alignment options that use more of the road space were prepared and provided to the community for feedback. 3 notes the result of the survey of 76 people, which indicated that 48% of those surveyed preferred option 3, which involves reducing the road width for the length of the principal shared path to minimise use of the verge space and impact on existing vegetation. 4, the town provides in principle support of option 3 and requests the Department of Transport undertake detailed designs of option 3. 5 notes the Department of Transport's commitment to implement a green route demonstration project to support activation of the Success Hill principal shared path designed to be visually appealing, combining natural planting and greenery to create a more pleasant walking and riding experience by increasing natural landscaping, shade, shelter and amenity. 6 notes recent discussions with the Department of Transport confirming that as option 3 minimises the removal of trees along the section of the principal shared path through Success Hill, the scope of the green route plantings can be extended further along the path towards Bassendean train station. 7 notes that the green transport route will be designed and maintained with the involvement of the town and the local community to ensure it complements and adds to the area's biodiversity and character. 8 seeks the Department of Transport to extend the scope of the green transport route to include Kelly Park to achieve increased natural landscaping, shade, shelter and amenity, including lighting. 9 approves further engagement to be undertaken by the town via Your Say and a local letterbox drop. This is to outline the purpose of the recent consultation, to advise the community of the outcome of the consultation, to allow any final feedback on the preferred option 3, in addition to providing information regarding the proposed green transport route pilot. 10 supports a follow-up report to be presented to Council at the August 2019 meeting, outlining any further feedback from the community and its next steps. 11, write to the Department of Transport formally seeking their response on the
option 4.
Road alignment as per option 4.
Okay, so just a couple of things. So I think you've got some concerns about the final feedback point.
The point 9, yes. The intention being that once we've received the detailed design, that's the point at which we engage with the community, and that it not be limited to Your Say in a letterbox drop, but may include a face-to-face discussion.
So let's worry about the specifics later, but do you want to remove final feedback on the preferred concept? Option 3?
Yes, just as long as there's an understanding that it will involve some face-to-face conversation about the detailed design once it exists.
So let's just take the word final out of there.
So point 9,
yes,
where it says to allow any final feedback on the preferred option.
Yeah, just remove the word final. Yep. Now, just one final point then, before. So in point 4, you've got in principle support, in which case, if we don't have a rescission motion in there, we've now got 2 options that we're supporting. So, Councillor Wilson, are you proposing, or would you be happy to have an additional point, which would now become a new point 5 for the rescission of the previous support for option 1?
I would be on the basis that it was the least preferred option of those surveyed.
Okay.
I'd like to move to suspend the standing orders.
Okay, hold on a moment. So we've just had a mover for that motion that has been clarified. Do we have a seconder before we continue any further? No? Okay, so you want to suspend standing orders to discuss. Okay, move to suspend standing orders. Is there a seconder? Councillor Wilson. Okay, all those in favour? Councillor Wilson, Mikachuk. Oh, hold on, people. I need to see your hands. Wilson, Mikachuk, Hamilton, Quinton, Brown. So it's carried. Against Councillor Ganjel and McLennan. Okay, Councillor Mikachuk.
Yeah. Can I just start? Does that mean I need to stand?
No, it's suspended.
Just because of I think it's an important decision, and the length of the motion in of itself and the way it was read out, I would say that I cannot fairly consider it, because I just haven't been able to absorb it, and I think that's not good decision making, and I just would like to say, can we slow it down, or if we feel like we can't make a decision tonight, can we defer it? Because I could not put my hand on heart and say just then that I could even take in the complexity of what's changed. Like if we had someone moment to moment on the screen showing me like what's differed, that would be helpful. But I think I should at least feel comfortable that I know what I'm making a decision on and how it
So just to clarify, I think changes different from what you've got in front of you. The only real change is that Councillor Wilson is giving in principle support rather than saying approves. There's still a rescission in there. Seeking feedback from the DOT, that we're making it clear that this isn't the final opportunity for feedback on the proposal. Is that a summary of your understanding?
Yes, and specifically that we're seeking feedback about the option 4 that's been discussed by several people in the gallery tonight. I personally don't feel comfortable just going from a verbal assurance given by a departmental staff member. I want to see that in writing as a decision of the department. If the department is saying that they will not consider an alignment that is on the road, that's their prerogative, but I just want to be certain of that before I exclude that as a possibility.
And I imagine that there'll be no problems getting that response in the next couple of weeks, so that by the time we have the report coming back to August, we'll have that information to base any further decisions on.
Yes, and just the reordering of the public consultation, I think people need to work with the final designs rather than indicative drawings, and all we've seen at the moment is indicative drawings. Final designs might have added detail about the separation as pedestrians come off the train station and interact with the bike path. I've ridden on the bike path a lot, and I appreciate to many people in the audience this is a new situation for your particular train station, but every single train station along the path has this same issue, and it's been addressed in different ways at different train stations.
Councillor,
I want to see
speak to the person that asked you the question.
I want to see what specifically they're proposing for this, rather than just a rough drawing.
So, how are you feeling about?
Not confident about making a decision, but maybe that means that I need to vote against it on the fact that I literally think that it's happened so quickly and in a way where.
Does anyone else have anything to say at this point? Okay. Do we want to move to reinstate standing orders? Councillor Wilson, seconded. Councillor Quinton, all those in favour? Carried unanimously. Okay, so back to your motion. We had a mover. Do we have a seconder at this point? Councillor Quinton, I imagine you're against. Councillor Gangel's against. Okay, would you like to open debate, Councillor Wilson?
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll be brief because I think we've canvassed most of the issues, but if people remain unclear as to what I'm proposing, what I'm suggesting is that we acknowledge that a majority of the 76 people surveyed who did give a preference to one of the options said that they preferred option 3, so I think it makes sense to get the detailed design done on that option 3, and that we then take that detailed design back to the community who's interested and concerned about what that would look like. And I also think it's incumbent upon us to get a certain position as to why it is the department wants to exclude a road alignment as a possibility, and we should do everything we can to make sure that we've got some certainty around that. for the members of the community who prefer to vote alone.
Thank you. My apologies, councillors. There's a rescission motion in here, so I need another seconder before the motion is live. Is there someone else who would like to support this motion? Councillor Hamilton, thank you very much. Councillor Quinton, would you like to speak?
Oh, only just to say that I'm quite comfortable with this now. I think, thank you for all of that, Councillor Wilson. I think we've heard very clearly from the community tonight that they still have concerns. I think it's okay to slow down. I think it's okay to allow them to still view some of the documents that we've only had since Friday as well. It was something that I received a phone call about saying, please let us see all of this stuff. So that makes me feel comfortable that the community can read this, because we are all about making sure that the community has all of the information as well as us. So very comfortable with that. Also, option 4, I received the email yesterday, and I have to admit I didn't read it all. So I'm very comfortable with us being able to get some clarification about why and why not about option 4, which would also give me time to read the incredibly lengthy email that we received about option 4. So very comfortable with that too. And yes, in order for us to move forward on this, we do need to give some kind of in-principle support. I do want to acknowledge some of the comments that were made by some of the community members about their use of footpaths. As a parent, my number one priority is my kid. I have stood up here in this council chamber and said that hundreds of times. My number one priority is my kids. And so making sure that they feel safe in learning about risk taking. It's really important. My kid's 4, so we need to create an environment where they feel safe to take risks, so that they can go speeding down a road at 30 kilometres an hour. So if we don't build an environment for them to do that, we are doing them a disservice. That's why I think this project, there are a lot of people here tonight who wouldn't think that that would be a reasonable reason to go ahead with the project, but I think it is a good reason to go ahead with the project. Again, very comfortable with the alternatives that have been made. And putting on the record that I think in terms of safety, people in wheelchairs, people using prams, kids learning to ride their bikes also need to be considered.
Thank you, Councillor Quinton. Councillor Hamilton?
I'm fine.
Okay. Councillor Ganjel?
Thank you, Your Worship. Look, just a number of things. Certainly, entering in here tonight, I certainly had a different mindset to where it's ultimately taken me tonight after the discussion and hearing the presentation and the like. I think to point out, a lot of talk's been said about an election promise or election commitment. To my understanding, and I'm happy to be proven wrong, but I believe the election commitment was around a pool of money being available for bike paths. So not necessarily this stretch. This stretch wasn't, to my knowledge, committed to at the election. A pool of money was committed to assist with the construction and improvement of bike paths. But I'll be happily proven wrong if we did get that committed to at the election. But it's great. I always love money being spent all the same in the town. In relation to where we're currently at, I certainly don't want to give community members false hope. I'm a little bit unaware of where the motion is travelling at the moment with engaging with the community members, in that there may be somehow some modification that's going to be made. It appears very clearly there's 2 options. We either fully endorse the principal shared path model, or we reject the principal shared path model. And certainly myself, I'm a pedestrian. I walk that frequently from here to Midland, and I note the point the gentleman made, and I forget his name, my apologies, in relation to the path finishing at Morrison Road, which is actually very correct, and I never took much notice of it. But also from the East Guildford train station, I tend to cross to the Guildford Grammar side of Gradeston Highway at that point. So there are points in it that people don't continue on directly with the path, and I believe my number one issue with the area that I personally see is the lighting of the area. I believe that could potentially be solved with an upgrading of lighting in the area, as well as council looking at potentially making some modifications ourselves to the road, so it wouldn't be a principal shared path as such, but it'll actually have cycle lanes down both sides of the road, which then could potentially resolve the stalemate that there is with this project. But ultimately, I'm comfortable either way. But certainly, I don't want to be giving community false hope that there's going to be further consultation or changes that won't eventuate. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other speakers for the motion? Against? Councillor Wilson, did you want to speak again?
Thank you, Your Worship. Just briefly, in reply to some of the comments raised by Councillor Gangel, it may or may not be false hope, but I think what we do owe the community is a discussion around the actual detail and an assurance that we've done everything we can to exclude an option that is clearly preferred by some people in our community who are here in the gallery tonight. If it is the case that the department formally corresponds with us and says that they will not consider option 4 as a part of this project, then at least the community has certainty around that rather than any unanswered questions. It might well be the case that once we receive detailed design and that's gone out to the community, a community member might note a change that could be made to improve what would otherwise happen, and we would have an opportunity to recommend that in our final approval of the design.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Okay, so we'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? Councillor Wilson, Mikachuk, Hamilton, Quinton, Brown and McLennan, and against is Councillor Gangel, and that is carried. 10.13, this is the RFT for the supply and assembly of the bins and the decision of the date of rollout of FOGO. Is that moving?
No, I've got a couple of questions. Firstly, I just wanted to check, although I am supportive of it, but there is, I take it, sufficient money in the budget to supply kitchen caddies, because I know that was one of the discussions that we're having, will we, won't we? So I just want to confirm that first. Yes, getting in.
Yes.
Yep,
Yes.
thank you. And secondly, I also note, unless I've completely missed it, there's no, I'm just pointing out to me now, I just want to know a new commencement day. We're looking sometime, hopefully before July 2020.
Yeah,
Thank you.
So my question for that, I've had this answer before, but I just want to have absolute certainty. Obviously, there's been some disappointment about some grant funding we were hoping for from the state government, which has influenced the proposal here to rescind the proposed start date for 1st November. Can you just absolutely confirm for me that the tender that we have is valid until the middle of next year?
The tender, the tender we have with going out, it has a no end date on that. It had a date of saying we want to initially supply those spare parts and bins by November this year. Conversations with the potential contractors leading into this, saying if there is a extension to July next year, would that affect the contract and them supplying the equipment and the financial arrangements within the tender? And they have advised us no, and they provide us something in email and written format for us to go through that process.
And just one follow-on question from that. With the tenderer, there's obviously quite a number of local governments at the moment that are looking at rolling out FOGO. Are they going to have the capacity to be flexible around our arrangements for next year? Or you've not had that conversation at all?
Yeah, we've had that conversation. Yeah, the conversation is basically, if we did go and if it's July next year, we throw it out, distribute all the bins, then we're looking at receiving them sometime late May. That was quite okay for them. From production side, it takes about 2 weeks. To get it here in the Perth and go through the process takes about 4 weeks. So it gives them plenty of time to arrange their number. And just to go along with that, I even have been in discussions with WA Waste Authority on the consequences of
Better Bins funding?
Changing our contract details to account to December 2020. And the feedback I got from that was we will not get penalised for that. All we need is something in writing. If, depending on the outcome on tonight, we'll provide that information back to it. And there won't be any, it'll be just a change of contract.
Thank you. Did someone else have their hand up first, or was it?
Only a follow-up question to that.
Okay, so Councillor Quinton, then Councillor Hamilton.
Thank you. So I just wanted to clarify that even if we go ahead with this tender, they will count back from the date that we decide we need the bins, or are we going to be stuck with 7,000 bins that we aren't rolling out, and because we haven't? I'm just trying to work out timing.
No, the timing is we will sit down with the contractor again and rejig the time frame for the structure of how the bins will be rolled out.
Yeah.
The details we're discussing with at the moment is the likelihood that we'll need the bins by late May to early June, so the contract will then have enough time to do all the setting up of the bins and to get it out. By delivering in May has no problems to them at all.
Okay. And I just wanted to put on the record and on the video that you have been exemplary. I think you're amazing. Your advice has been incredible, and I wish you all the best.
Councillor Hamilton.
I've just got a few small questions. One of them's in the confidential documents, but I won't actually go into much detail. But there is a section there where hot stamping the bins, it's got nil, but I'm assuming that's a nil charge. Maybe not.
That's correct, it is a nil charge.
Right.
And in item 3 of our recommendations is that we have another discussion very quickly soon to go through those little changes with council before we make the final decision.
So this is I was going to ask as well, this might be for the CEO, I think we were planning a workshop, but I can't remember when we were planning that.
Yes, we are having a workshop. There's a few things that are happening. Obviously, unfortunately, we're losing Ken next week. So we've been undertaking a selection recruitment process for a waste and recycling coordinator. And fortunately, we've identified somebody suitable. Ken and I've been involved in the selection. That person will be coming in next week to do a handover with Ken. We've also formed a project control group internally comprising the Director Corporate Services, the Acting Executive Manager Infrastructure, myself, and Corporate Communications Coordinator and Waste and Recycling Officer. And we're looking at the program and also the community engagement strategy. When we've got a proposal, we'd like to have a workshop that will probably be late August, and sit down with council and go through that and make sure that you're comfortable with the parameters and the rollout and when the community education will happen and so on.
Okay. So I do have another question. Gee, it might be the last question I ask you, Ken. So that's what I was thinking. That's a bit sad. I have to bring you in after you retired and then you sit there. So. Anyway, the second separable portion, there is something in there that I don't really want to discuss too much, but I want to know how much flexibility we've got with the stickers in that separable portion if we wanted to change the not so much the sizing, but perhaps the positioning and things like that on, because I know what's in there, but I wanted to know if there's any flexibility given that the tender document has already been responded to.
In the tender, document, it basically tells, requests the contractor to provide us details of how much it costs to print up a sticker to different size. The size of the sticker is irrelevant.
Yep. The
location where we're going to put the bin, if we go down that track, is irrelevant.
Excellent. Thank you.
Okay. If there's no further questions, we've got an officer recommendation. Is there somebody who would be willing to move the recommendation? Or is that a question?
I would be willing to move it with a fourth point.
And would you like to read your fourth point?
Yes, I'm just scrolling it down. Enters into discussions with the EMRC. About establishing a clear mutual understanding on the conditions precedent to a rollout.
Sorry, their mutual understanding.
Of the conditions precedent to a rollout, so the things that need to be in place prior to or the implementation, of the FOGO system, and also inquires as to the EMRC's ability to assist the town of Bassendean with the education program.
Okay, so we've got, are you comfortable with that, Amy?
I think so. Do you want me to read it?
Yes, that would be fabulous, thank you.
1.4, that council enters into discussions with the EMRC regarding the establishment of a, did you say fair mutual?
To establish mutual understanding, sorry?
To the establishment.
To establish
of a mutual understanding.
Yes. Of the
conditions precedent to a rollout.
Yes.
And also inquires as to the EMRC's ability to assist the town of Bassendean with the education program.
Yes.
Okay, is everyone comfortable there? Clear on that? So Councillor Wilson has moved it. We need 2 seconds because there's a rescission as part of this. So Councillor Quinton seconded and also Councillor Hamilton. Is there anybody against? Okay, all those in favour? That's carried unanimously. 10.14, the implementation of differential rates. Questions for the staff? Councillor Gadgell?
Yes, thank you. Now, Mr. White, welcome. Okay, now it's my understanding that you commenced at the town after the start of the implementation of this process. Is that correct?
That's correct. After the preparation of the previous report.
Yes. So I'm just wondering if you could tell me just. As part of the notice, there was in their proposed objects and reasons. Why is that required to be in the notice?
The proposed objects and reasons.
Yes. Why is that required to be in the notice?
There's a requirement under the Local Government Act to advertise.
Yes.
The objects and reasons.
Yes. Do they need to be factual?
I would have thought so.
Yep. Okay. Then, if I could, then I'm just wondering what research did the town do when they put? And I understand you didn't. To my knowledge, you didn't actually write this up. That's why I just wanted to clarify that position. But the proposed objects and reasons, a prime reason to apply a higher differential rate in the dollar to vacant land than the base rate is to distribute the rates burden equitably, where a higher or differential rate of unimproved vacant land recognises additional costs of servicing those types of properties. So then we go on and we list a whole raft of what could potentially be, may potentially be, additional costs of servicing those properties. What breakdowns did the town do to show that we were servicing those properties that were vacant above and beyond, or above, I should say, just above those with already dwelling on the property?
So I think the CEO is going to answer that for
wonderful.
us.
Thank you.
I'm happy to answer that because Paul did come in late in the piece.
Thank you. Yep.
And this previous work was undertaken by a former officer who's no longer with the town of Bassendean. So the resolution was made in June, and because of the compressed period of time, there hasn't been, I guess, the research to provide the evidence base around the objects and reasons that you've highlighted.
Yep.
And that is something that the officers have highlighted on page 105 and 106 of the agenda papers. So I guess looking across other local governments, there are some standard factors that are often used, and I think what's happened is we've leveraged from those. But in terms of the hard data, the hard evidence to support them, we don't have that readily available at this point.
Okay. Now, just following on from that, then, if we have no justification data as such, and we're going out and we're giving a particular group a higher rate than another group, how then is that not just, as it was termed earlier tonight, a cash grab from that particular group, when we've got no justification, no research, no analysis? How is that not, well, these people over here should pay more than these people over here? I mean, it's the equivalent of saying people with blue eyes should pay 10 times more than people with every other colour.
I'm not sure that's a question that we can expect the staff to answer because it was a resolution of council to pursue this.
Okay,
So
thank
I think
you.
you've made your point through your question.
Yes. Well, for the time being, I do have additional questions, but I will allow other councillors
Councillor
to
Hamilton.
continue.
Reading from the report and having read the Act as well, would the officers confirm that it is within the Act to charge differential rating based on the category of the land? That you know, if I'm reading page 99 and 100, differential rate. A local government may impose differential general rates according to any or a combination of the following characteristics. A, the purpose for which the land is zoned, whether or not under a local planning scheme or improvement scheme in force under Planning or Development Act 2005. B, a purpose for which the land is held or used as determined by the local government. Or C, whether or not the land is vacant land. Or D, any other characteristic or combination of the characteristics prescribed. So the way I read that, the Act allows a council to raise differential rates dependent upon the, well, for instance, C says whether or not land is vacant land. And correct me if I'm wrong, most councils, when they have advertised differential rating, have indicated that it is to encourage development of the land, amongst other reasons. Would that be correct?
Well, firstly, thank you, through the Chair. Firstly, it is correct that it is actually a permitted purpose to levy differential rates under the Act, the usage of the land. In relation to the second part of the question, we have not undertaken a complete survey of other local governments at this point in time, so I'm not able to say what the rationale for most local governments who have implemented differential rating on vacant land has been.
Other questions? Councillor Gabriel.
Yes. I noticed our planning officer has gone home early.
He thought must have thought he was not needed.
Because my next questions are actually on planning. I was wondering, do we have, well, I suppose, because we've been through this process for at least a couple of months, I suppose 3 months, maybe 4 months from the initial notice of motion getting passed. Has the town broken down how many of the vacant blocks currently have plans submitted to the council for development? I note in the submissions there were a number of people that actually said they had plans with the town. Has the town broken down how many of the vacant blocks currently have plans with the town for submissions for development?
No, we haven't, but obviously we have noted as well that a number of the submissions have mentioned developments in
yes.
progress of those
Yep.
plans launched.
So then I'm also assuming my next question then, we haven't broken the land down into area zoning, into whether or not it's a battle axe block, whereabouts it's located?
No, that level of analysis
Yep.
has not been undertaken.
Okay. Now, I just got two more. So just also, the other thing that's I gather hasn't been taken, we talk about trying to encourage development and growth, but I'm assuming no research or feedback or analysis has been done with the people that actually have the vacant lands, whether or not that would indeed encourage that. Therefore, I suppose what I'm asking for, we've got no measurables that we're actually putting up to say this is how we're going to achieve that this is successful.
Aside from, I guess, the community feedback
Yep.
that has been received in response to our various initiatives to seek that feedback, and I think the majority of the feedback that goes to the particular issue we're talking
Yep.
about tends to indicate that it wouldn't necessarily encourage.
Yes. Now, my final one, the town in a land swap received 2 blocks from the state government. How long have those 2 blocks been on the market for that we've been looking? I know we've recently taken them off the market, I believe, but how long have we been endeavouring to try and sell those blocks?
Since before I joined the town, I think a number of months at least.
Yes, so I think they went on the market last year, and on the 30th of June they came off the market.
Yep, wonderful. So just, I suppose it's more for councillors in debate, but the measurables, let's say hypothetically the differential rate gets put in place. We come back this time next year, there's been no development increase. Does that then mean it's been unsuccessful and we drop it, or do we keep charging it? I didn't answer that, that's rhetorical. Thank you.
Councillor Hamilton.
Okay, correct me if I'm wrong, but when a development application is put in on a vacant block of land, the rating for that is pro rata for the year. So when the development is complete, Landgate apparently, if I'm correct, they notify you, and then there's a pro rata application of the rates for that land proportional to the time of year that was vacant to when it became developed. Is that correct?
Yes, thank you. That is correct. So my understanding is that if there's an event that occurs in relation to a land, such as a development or a demolition, it triggers a revaluation, and we receive notice from the Valuer General, and that initiates an interim rates notice.
Okay. Okay. I'll leave that for a minute.
Further questions? Councillor Brown?
Thank you. How many stagnant or undeveloped industrial or commercial blocks are there as opposed to residential blocks? Do we know that?
We have done some very preliminary work on that today, and I understand it's about 18.
Commercial industrial?
Yes.
Other questions? Yes, Councillor Hamilton?
Just foreshadowing that I've actually got an alternative to the officer's recommendation.
So the officer's recommendation is currently open in that point 2 allows councillors to select an option. So it's not really an alternative, you're just proposing a motion and your
My alternative is
option.
not one of the officer's recommendations.
Yep. So would you like to read your alternative?
Okay. That Council 1 receives the 21 written submissions, 14 community-led feedback forms and 59 completed Your Say website surveys outlined in the attachments included in the ordinary council agenda of 23rd July 2019, and 2, implements a differential rating for the 2019-20 financial year as follows. A, GRV for vacant industrial, vacant commercial and vacant non-residential land rate in the dollar of 0.145 and minimum rates of 1,800, and B, GRV vacant residential land rate in the dollar of 0.08 and a minimum rates of 1,200, and C, GRV all other property base rate 1% general rate increase with a rate in the dollar of 0.07302 and minimum rates of 1,106. 3. Request staff to provide a differential rating report for the consideration of councillors each year in advance of the annual budget workshops.
Okay. Councillor Wilson, why are you standing?
I would like to ask a question of the leader.
Okay.
So, Councillor Hamilton, I just want to be clear on what it is you're proposing here. Am I correct in assuming that what you're proposing is to keep the differential rate as advertised on industrial and on commercial, but to instead have a significantly reduced increase on residential land? Is that?
Yes, that's correct. However, with the industrial and commercial vacant land, the advertised minimum rate was 2,100. I've reduced that to 1,800 because I believe that's more reasonable. And with the vacant residential land, yes, you're correct, it's a very small increase compared to what was advertised. Advertised was almost double the rate, whereas the increase I propose is only about 10% of the rate. And then, of course, you've got the base rate, which was a 1% increase on on all other land, which is basically improved land, which is basically what was advertised.
Right. So just so I'm clear, that would mean that what you're proposing is that it would be, say, about a $90 a year increase for a residential property on a base rate as compared to what was advertised?
If you're paying the minimum,
yeah.
Yes, it would entail a $94 increase per annum. Obviously, the GRV on vacant residential properties varies, so it's very difficult for me to give a definitive response to what the increase would be for vacant residential land with that comparison, but you could say that it would probably be roughly about the same as per the minimum. So,
okay, thank you.
Councillor Brown?
I can't understand the point of point B and C. I understand the 2A. That was always my focus many years ago, to try and have people sitting on unused commercial properties to give us the tool to motivate them to develop, but never intention to increase or penalise people in residential blocks.
So
I just can't see the purpose.
So, Councillor Brown, is your question, what is the purpose of
What is the purpose of a $90 a year rate rise and GRV of 1%, as you state in number 3? I cannot see the point.
Point C is something that you have to put in there. That's the 1% increase that we proposed for improved property. So you have to put that in there because that's your base rate. So that was advertised for all improved properties that have a building on it. So that 1% rate increase is what was discussed in a council workshop for a budget, and that equates to a 0.07302 rate in the dollar increase and a minimum rate of 1,106, which goes up from $1,094, which was last year's minimum rate. So that's a very small increase.
Thank you. Then we go back to the previous
point B. Point B is a small increase on, which equates to around about a 3% increase on last year's rates. If we were looking at last year's rates, it equates to around about a maybe 3.5% increase in rates. But in real terms, for the person who's paying out of their pocket, it probably equates to around about $90 a year. However, as I said, all residential properties vacant land varies. So some would pay less, some would pay more than that, depending on the GRV, because I don't know the individual GRVs of all the vacant land. But it is, compared to what was advertised, it is an extremely small rate rise, but it does acknowledge that vacant residential land, basically a lot of it is sitting there and has been sitting there for a very long time, and it acknowledges the fact that we as a council have long-term infrastructure projects that sometimes take 7 or 8 years to implement, that cost a fortune and will actually be lasting sometimes for 30, 40 years.
Okay, Councillor Hamilton, I feel like we're in debate at the moment.
Sorry,
at
apologies.
the moment.
Apologies.
So you have foreshadowed a motion, you haven't actually moved it. Oh, sorry.
Just a clarity question. If we are increasing the gross rental value, setting a minimum.
We're not increasing gross rental value.
Gross rental value. Sorry. If we're increasing the rate in the dollar of the gross rental value, and setting a minimum, and we're additionally putting a 1%, does that 1% go on top, or are they?
Okay, so can I just speak to that for a moment, because while you've been speaking, the staff have been saying that point C in the motion is somewhat problematic because we have not set the budget yet.
Yes.
I think there's a general agreement amongst councillors that is what we're aiming for, but Councillor Hamilton, maybe you would like to consider removing that for now, and that can be determined finally when we have actually finalised the budget.
Okay, so I think I was just trying to get clarity as to what we've
Okay, so can I? So you have foreshadowed this motion, Councillor Hamilton. I'm understanding that you're happy to remove point C at this stage, 2C. Is that correct? Amy, are you okay with that? So we don't even have a seconder for this motion at the moment. So Councillor Wilson has seconded. Is there anybody against this motion? Councillor Gangel, Councillor Hamilton, can you start debate, please?
Okay. Thank you. As my fellow councillors know, I have looked at differential rating for some time. It's interesting to note that a lot of those councils that have actually employed differential rate for some years have managed to find a nice balance. Now, obviously, this is a really simple differential rating system that I've put forward. I don't particularly agree with the excessive amount that was advertised, particularly for residential. Okay, so I have looked at it. I've looked at the officer's report, and I have come up with what I believe is a compromise. Now, this compromise is based on what we've discussed in councillor budget workshops, where we are looking. Last year we kept the rate increase, a uniform rate increase, as low as possible, below 1%. We acknowledge that this town, we would like to try and keep our rate increases low again. But when we do uniform rating, we're charging everyone the same. There are some areas of the business where we are paying out a lot of money in long-term projects, and we are not necessarily getting back the return from all rateable properties in a form that actually is a genuine equitable contribution. Now, this comes back to GRV. GRV is not set by council. We do not set the rate, the gross rental value on properties. That's set by the state government. No system is perfect. So what we're trying to do is to work with an imperfect system and come up with the best, most equitable deal for our residents. So some properties like commercial and industrial areas tend to cost the town a lot more money because we do a lot more road surfacing, a lot more curbing, a lot more work goes into some of those areas. We also have very big areas, not so many number of properties in the industrial area, but we certainly have some big sized areas there which have remained vacant for 30 years or plus. We have residents who've told us numerous times, we need to see development in these areas, this area, that area, and we have many vacant blocks which have been vacant for 5 or 6 or 10 or 20 years. And we've been asked as councillors by our ratepayers to address this issue. Now, this is not a perfect solution. I won't tell you hand on heart that this will fix every problem, but it's a start. It's a small step in the right direction. Councillor Ganchel asked before, what would happen if this doesn't work? Well, each council every year their prime job is to actually look at rates. So if it doesn't work, okay, well then next year there'll be a new council, there'll be other councils on, we'll look at it again, as will the council the year after and the year after that. That is normal daily work for council, to look at rating and how to actually make it.
Okay, Councillor Hamilton, that's your 3 minutes, thank you.
So I would ask councillors to vote for this.
Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Your Worship. So there's 3 different categories of land that we deal with here: industrial, commercial, residential. Just briefly on industrial land, Councillor Brown has spoken many times about the large pile of contaminated dirt that sits on a vacant lot in the middle of our industrial area. We are being used as a dumping ground by the person who owns that land because it's cheaper to pay rates, minimal rates on a vacant lot than it is to deal with the contaminated soil. That land's best purpose is to provide jobs for people in our community, and I am very comfortable increasing the rates on the person who owns that block of land, because I would like to encourage them to deal with the problem that they have with the contaminated soil and to use that land for a better and higher purpose. Similarly, there are commercial areas in our town that have sat vacant, dilapidated sometimes for 20 years. The owners of that land, for whatever reason, have chosen not to develop it. That is their choice as an owner, but we as a community suffer because there are reduced options for employment and commerce and shopping in our town, and I'm very happy to put an increased rate on those commercial zoned lands as advertised. I do understand that there are people with residential properties who would be hard hit by what was advertised. I think a very modest, small increase will have a much reduced impact on those people who find themselves, for whatever reason, encumbered with a vacant lot that they're having trouble realising investment return from. We all make investment decisions in life. Some of them are good, some of them are bad. I do note that the Commonwealth Government in its budget last year decided to remove a whole heap of tax deductions that are available to people who own vacant land because they say, and I quote, "It is intended to reduce tax incentives for land banking, which can limit the availability of land for housing and other developments." This is something that all levels of government are grappling with. I would like to see our community provide more opportunities for people to live in our community. I appreciate there are hard cases created out of that. For that reason, I support Councillor Hamilton's decision to minimise the impact on people that would be adversely impacted. But that said, I do think there is a case to be made to say that we should treat slightly differently those people who sit on vacant properties. When I went door knocking before I got elected in council, many people said to me that they were concerned about the issue of vacant land in our town. They wanted something done about it, and I respect their desire, and that's why I support this motion and would encourage other councillors to do so.
Thank you, Councillor Ganjo.
Thank you, Your Worship. Where to begin? Look, staggering really. We've heard tonight the town's done no research, no analysis, no idea. We've put notification out there. This is why we're going to increase the values of one set of property group, but nothing can be verified, nothing can be backed up, nothing can be substantiated. We don't have a breakdown of the land in which we're talking about. When you talk about planning applications have plummeted through the floor at the town. We are not getting planning applications in like we were potentially 5 years ago. Property values have now slumped to some of their worst levels in quite foreseeable time, certainly beyond a decade or more. These are people who potentially have purchased property for hoping for I return, and they may well have purchased it for a high amount in, let's say, 2011. They purchased a property that was worth $500,000, demolished the house thinking they would then put some units on it. They then couldn't get the funding for the units. It's not just a simple matter of just whacking a for sale sign up and selling the block of land, because the bank doesn't go, don't worry, you couldn't recoup that $300,000 that you still owe us. We'll wipe that from your account. That doesn't happen at all. When council talks about this urgent rush, this urgent need to get every possible bit of land developed in the town, well, the council put through an omnibus motion that actually rezoned residential developable land that the town had to Parks and Rec. We rezoned it under an omnibus amendment, and all of a sudden now there's this rush to get development happening everywhere. The problem is development isn't happening. It's not easy to get a loan required to do the development. Furthermore, we don't know what the circumstances are of the individuals involved. It's a very small proportion, largely of the town. You're talking about 188 properties, thereabouts 2.5%. So I would urge councillors and remind councillors that every ratepayer has the right to object. They have 42 days to lodge objections, and I would suggest that this town has done no analysis, no research, no justification for any additional increase on any parcel of land for any services that are created above anybody else. Thank you.
You had 2 extra seconds, Councillor Gadgel. Any speakers for the motion? Against? Councillor Brown?
Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, I'm a little dismayed at the direction this has taken. There was some 3 years ago that we mentioned or explored the opportunity to apply differential rating to commercial properties. My motivation was that 4 hectares of contaminated land, that is the contents of which are pluming underground and through our creeks down into our wetland, into our river system. That was all, looking for a tool, because there's positive implications of that. Our rating stock could be improved dramatically if that mound were taken away, was turned into residential or into industrial lots by a factor of 40. And the implication of that to our rate base is quite significant. This is looking to the future, but we need to motivate those people. And that's just one block of land. Some of the other industrial blocks have the potential for 10, 12, 20 units, so let's say only 18. It's significantly more than that. It improves our bottom line. So that was never my intention to penalise residential owners. The reason people are hanging on to their blocks is actually a government. You can look no further than our various state governments, because they let people in Nashville know that on the horizon looming were variations in their arcades that would allow them to develop their land. It's not being greedy. It was just a decision they made based on what they were being told by the state government and us, that the Ashfield precinct plan was about to happen. So people held onto their blocks, and then came along the property crash, which about 5 years ago. So there's reasons people held onto their land. They're not going to sell them now or develop those lands because they'll be selling them at a knockdown price. That's not going to happen. I wouldn't do it. So it was never my intention for residents residential vacant land to be caught up in it. I would probably consider this differently if B and C were knocked out completely, but otherwise I am not inclined to vote for this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further speakers for or against? Okay, I would like to speak. First of all, I want to thank Kath, because obviously Kath has put an enormous amount of work into differential rates, and I think all of us in this room understand her frustration and that her intentions for our town are highly admirable. And thank you, Paul, for the extra workload that this has created in your first few weeks. Thanks for your efforts in that. Like most people in this room, I supported us exploring differential rating with our community as one of the levers that's available to us. And I still think it is worthy of consideration. And the proposal you've put forward now, Kath, for option 7 is highly preferable to the others that were before us, and definitely preferable to what was put to the community for consultation. I like the fact that it's more moderate and that it demonstrates that we have been listening to the community in their feedback. I don't disagree with the comments that Councillor Hamilton or Councillor Wilson have made about the potential benefits of using differential rating. And there's no doubt that Kath has done her research on this, but the town has not, and I don't mean that as a criticism of our staff. They've not had the opportunity to do so. Us as councillors have never sat down and had a discussion around differential rating for industrial and commercial land. We want to attract industry, we want to attract commercial activity. The staff have not had the ability to speak to us about any additional costs that might be incurred by industrial and commercial land. This really is policy on the fly, and it's something that we as councillors have objected to in the past, and we want to do better. I think the timing is wrong. The staff have clearly articulated that they have concerns about the compressed time frame. We now have some fantastic new staff on board. I'm not sure how many weeks you've been here, Paul, but it's only a handful. And I have full confidence in the next year that he will have a look at our budgeting process, our rating system, what other levers are available to us, and that this can be presented to council in a more holistic and integrated way, and that we can have those discussions in a forum other than at a council meeting where we're trying to make a last minute decision. I don't think there's any urgency. I understand that there's some frustration about the length of time that it has taken for this to come to council, but I think we need to take a more considered approach. I don't think it's the right time to be encouraging development for all sorts of reasons, some of which Councillor Gangel has spoken to, but also the fact that we're in the process of creating a new local planning scheme and strategy, new local planning policies that are going to help to shape the town the way we want it in the future, that will give us some more control over the development that happens. I don't think right now is the time to be developing what potentially would be poor quality development that is not in step with what we want for the long term. And we haven't given our ratepayers an opportunity to budget for any changes that we might implement with such short notice. So I'm definitely open to exploring options that are available to us in future about how we can more equitably distribute our rates. I'm definitely in support of exploring the levers that we have available to us to support appropriate development, but I think in the interest of good governance that we should be deferring this and allowing us to have a more holistic approach. Any other speakers? Councillor Hamilton.
Okay. You're correct. I have actually spent some considerable time exploring this, and in fact I have endeavoured to get a report on this back to council for what, a year and a half?
I think so.
So you are correct, yes, I have spent a lot of time on this, and which is why I went to the length of considering what was advertised and came forward with what I consider to be a more modified, more reasonable type of approach. I'd also like to point out that I have a list here of councils. We have Vic Park that charge 0.084 cents in the dollar. We go right through to Armidale, then we go through to Joondalup, which charge 11 cents in the dollar for vacant land. And then we've got Wanneroo, 13 cents in the dollar for vacant land. So by no means is a 0.08 cents in the dollar a massive increase. And in fact, if we were putting through a 3 or 4% rate increase at the uniform rate, this is exactly the same as what people would pay. We have adjoining councils all around us that have been implementing rate increases that are way in excess of 1%, 2, 3, 3.5%. So this is not an unreasonable response to the fact that we have I guess we're a council, we're paying the price because we are trying to actually keep our rates low. So There have certainly been other councils that have made hay while the sun shine and actually increased rates at a great rate of knots. And here we are 2 years in a row trying to keep our rates low. So, you know, I can't speak for all councils, but I know that when we go into the next budget meeting next week, that I personally will be arguing for a basic rate increase of 1%. I won't be actually supporting anything more than that. Now that's my position, I've put it out there in the public realm. However, with differential rates and charging commercial and industrial land, as Bob has indicated, Bob Brown, we have some really serious land bankers in the industrial area. 4.5 hectares, that big parcel of land is, that's been sitting there. I think it's 33 years. But hey, let's move on. Residential, I have taken on board the community response on residential, and that's reflected in what I've put forward. And so I would urge councillors to support this. We have, as all of you know, certain things that we have to pay for in this council. I don't particularly think as a small council that we're flush with money. We have not met our projects yet. We are already still in a shortfall situation. Some of these projects are very long term, and they will benefit people who may not develop tomorrow. They might develop in 5 years, they might develop in 10 years, but they will reap the benefit of all these projects that this council has been putting forward now and putting into plan. We have assets. We have been talking about all our ageing assets in the town, which are literally falling down. We have no asset renewal plan. At least some of this money could go towards renewing the assets.
Thank you, Councillor Hamilton. Okay, all those in favour of the motion, we have Councillor Wilson, Hamilton and Quinton, and against we have Councillor Gangel.
Sorry, I voted for.
Okay, hold on. For, we have Councillor Wilson, Mikachuk, Hamilton and Quinton. Yes?
Yeah.
Against, we have Councillor Gangel, Brown and McLennan, and that is carried with an absolute majority. 1019, accounts for payment. Was that you, Councillor Gangel?
Yes, thank you. I do have, just bear with me, I'm just going to get it now. Just while I look for my first one. Councillor Yates mentioned tonight, if I could get an understanding, about $2,000 or $1,800 worth of speech writing. What was
that
for?
Assistance at the AGM.
Oh, okay, yeah. So my first one is it's on page 4 of 13, and it's EFT 38.
So which attachment are we, Councillor?
Oh, this is the council for payment. Yes.
But which attachment? I'm just finding.
Sorry. I don't know.
Sorry, hang on.
Hang on. Sorry.
It's attachment
15.
15. Yes.
Yep.
Page 4. It'll be a very quick one. Just wanting to know, I just note there's been an audit of street trees planted along Old Perth Road. I just wanted to know if that included the medium strip.
Yes.
Oh, hallelujah.
It's an excellent report.
Okay, thank you. So I'll be coming to council at some stage, I would suggest.
He went to the Town Assets Committee.
Okay. Just I think this is the last one that I had. Page 7 of 13. It's EFT 38341. It's Mills Wilson, urgent media relations advice, drafting of statement, $600.
Yeah, I think that was in response to the waste management tracking system. You might remember we had national coverage in a very compressed period of time, and things were getting a little heated, and we needed to provide an immediate response, and it was pre the commencement of our corporate.
Oh, okay, yep. So in the future they'll all be handled in-house. Yep, no problem. I did have one more. Here we are. Very exciting. EFT 38362. Print Smart Online PTY. Library printing cover book political history. Oh, that sounds exciting. A cover's been printed. Where are we at with the we're still spending money on overseas, so I'm assuming there's going to be a finished product?
I saw a earlier version probably a couple of months ago, and it probably needed a little bit more work at that stage, but it has gone back to the library for some further refinement.
So it sounds like the cover was good to go.
But there is a time frame though that it starts to get a bit old for an updated history.
Yes.
I might get a bigger chapter.
Councillor Hamilton.
In respect to the payment to Arbor Carbon that Councillor Gangel brought up, I do note that in last month's payment figures, there was another payment for exactly the same audit, and I just wondered if the staff could take that on notice. I've got the EFT number if you want to write it down. The two EFT numbers are 38248 and 37916. So the total amount paid to Arbor Carbon for that audit was 6,850. So it's two separate payments, which was kind of curious. Now, in our current payment figures, we have another EFT, which is EFT 38346, and that's $30,000. Now, it's listed on here, and I just put a question mark against it. It's $30,000 to Nature Play Solutions, but it's got for Ashfield Playground Development. So I wrote which playground because I'm confused. I'm sure that's not for Ashfield.
Well, they're the ones that are working on Sandy Beach for us.
Yeah, well, that's what I thought, but I'm bringing it to your attention because it's written for Ashfield Playground.
I think it's Ashfield.
We've got another oops, sorry, just lost it there. We've got another EFT payment, EFT 38323, $4,620 paid to Land Care Weed Control. This is another one you'll have to take on notice. And that's listed as for hand weeding, but I understand the Bindaring Friends Group do all the hand weeding there, so I'm curious about what that's for. Then we've got EFT 38354. We've got a payment to the Old Perth Road Coordinator, $2,005, which is Penelope. But we also had a June payment, which was EFT 37933, which was $3,980, which is also to Penelope. The only reason I'm asking about that is because Lizzie has been doing that role for 2 months, so I'm wondering about how she's being paid, if we're still paying the other lady.
It might just be a timing issue, so we can look at when the invoices were received.
Okay, cool.
Was that all the
Okay,
questions?
that'll do.
Okay, so we have a mover for the officer recommendation. Councillor Gangel, seconded Councillor Wilson. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. So that is all of the reports. There are no notices of motion. Are there any announcements or notices of motion for the next meeting? There's no confidential business. So the meeting closes at 10:39. Yes, Councillor Hamilton?
Oh, sorry, the others were carried on block. Sorry.
At 10:39 p.m.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Me.